via Zoom as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the meeting is being recorded and also live streamed to the community via the YouTube channel. We have all elected members present and there are no apologies. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which the city of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. Now I'd like to transfer of agenda items. Are there any items on either the open or the closed agenda that anyone would like transferred? I can't see any hands raised to do that, so we'll move on. Item 3, communication from the chairman. I don't have anything tonight. And notification of council workshops. We haven't had any council workshops. Public question time. General Manager, do we have any public questions?
No public questions, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Petitions. Have we got any petitions, General Manager?
We have one, Lord Mayor. Would you care for me to have it read?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The petition reads, we request that the Pinnacle Road is regularly closed to motor vehicles, allowing walkers, cyclists and others safe and enjoyable uses of the road. This could be one day per fortnight or per month, for example. Lord Mayor, it has 1,320 signatories.
Okay, would anyone like to move that that's referred to a committee? Councillor Dutta would, and seconded by Alderman Briscoe. Yep. So would anyone like to vote against that being referred to the appropriate committee? I thought we did. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so would anyone, if anyone would like to vote against referring that to the that petition to the appropriate committee, please raise your hand. Alderman Briscoe, you might just want to pop your hand down briefly. And now, if you do want to vote against that, please raise your hand. Okay, so there's no hands raised, so therefore that has been passed unanimously as a motion for that petition to be referred to committee. Consideration of supplementary items. General Manager, are there any supplementary items for the open meeting?
No, Lord Mayor, there are not.
Okay. Are there any indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest? Councillor Burnett.
Lord Mayor, item 9.2, 11 Swan Street, declare an interest on that one.
Okay, any other indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest? Okay, there's being none, I will move on to item 9, which is council acting as a planning authority. And item 9.1 is 14 Stoke Street, Newtown. And I think, is Alderman Barakis moving those this week?
I believe I'm moving them in, given that the Deputy Lord Mayor was absent for the committee last week. Lord Mayor, thank you. So item 9.1, Lord Mayor, I'll move that.
So we need a seconder for that. Someone like to second that? Councillor Burnett, would you mind putting your hand down just when you're finished?
No.
And I think that's been seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, this is a application to approve, motions to approve, sorry, application for partial demolition, alterations and extensions, landscaping and car parking, apologies, on 14 Stoke Street. The application received 0 representations. There was some debate and discussion about the heritage nature of the proposed works and the impact that was going to have. There was some differences of opinion on as to the importance of the yard and the impact that the application would have. Ultimately, though, the majority of the committee did agree that this was something that would be able to appropriately go ahead without unduly impacting significant heritage. So I'll happily commend the motion.
Okay, so we have the motion. I can see that Councillor Dutta would like to speak. Councillor Dutta?
A few questions, Lord Mayor, through you.
Yes.
Questions of clarification. Would the officer, through you, explain or clarify what does the open green space means? Does that equate to landscape elements or not?
Mr. Noy, would you like to respond?
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, that's correct. It's the landscape surrounding the buildings.
Councillor Dutta, did you?
Yeah, the follow-up question is, what does the landscape elements constitute?
Well, it includes both the vegetation and also the space, the open space that surrounds the landscape elements.
Just a further follow-up, would that all include trees and lawns and grass?
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you. And the final question, why is this grassed area of historical significance?
Look, I might refer that to the heritage officer that assessed the application, Megan Baines. If I could simply refer that one to Megan, who might be able to respond. You're on mute, Megan.
Hello, Megan Baines, Cultural Heritage Officer. So I guess I would refer you to my report, but in essence, this garden that we're talking about at Stoke Street, it was a 19th century estate. So the building that you see there is actually from the 1830s, and the man who owned the garden was a very important historical figure. And this particular 19th century estate is referred to specifically in the precinctual statement of significance. It talks about this 19th century estate, and there's only one in this precinct, so it's particularly noted in the planning scheme. So this house and this garden is from the 19th century, and it's protected. And they use the word estate, and what that means is not just the building, but the building in its landscape. And perhaps the best way to talk about this, if we can share screens, is, hang on, I can show you a photograph, because a photo, really does speak 1,000 words. I'm trying to bring it up. Can you guys see that?
We just need the screen shared, I think.
Yeah, hang on, give me a second. Share screen. Oh, it says the host has disabled the participant sharing the screen. That's right, it won't work. Yeah, so there's a very grand stone house, and it had a huge acreage, and the area of garden which sits between the stone house and the smaller timber building is what is left of that 19th century estate. So if this proposed building was put there, the sense of this very grand large garden would be eclipsed, it would be gone forever. And I think that it's clearly protected in the planning scheme, and the person associated with this garden is a very important historical figure. So yeah, the landscape elements are protected in the planning scheme, and they're proposing to demolish landscape elements. So I think it's very straightforward that it's a historic garden, and it needs to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dutta, did you want to speak as well, or if you just want the questions?
I will speak if there are no other questions. I am quite happy to be guided.
Or this, I think you've got the floor, so if you go ahead, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to begin by making two observations. In our 29th June committee, the City Planning Committee meeting, we had a deputation, and a presentation was made by the applicant's heritage architect and consultant. And there are two observations I like to make in his presentation. One, there was statement made that there was no public submission against this development application. And this is true. There was no application made by the public against it. But that does not mean, if we don't have anyone opposing, that means yes. On the contrary, there are times when we have 100, 200, 300 people who are against a development. We are not swayed by numbers, but we need to, as elected members, look at the provisions of the planning scheme. And it is under this heritage code that we've got to make a decision, not based on how many people have responded or have not responded. That's the first observation. The second observation I make is this, that the Heritage Council, it says in the submission made by this learned gentleman, that the Heritage Council, the Hobart City Planning Officer, the Hobart City Engineer, have all approved this application with conditions. Now, the fact that all of them have approved does not mean that they have looked at the same clauses or the same thing or the same criteria or the same act. If they have looked at the same criteria, I would say, yes, there is a valid point. But what we need to note as members, that the approval given by the engineer is based on engineering grounds and so forth. And therefore, this is very important. Let me make 2 points. Issue number one is this: whether the grassed area or the landscape elements, as we have been told, constitutes part of the Spode's 19th century estate and therefore has historical significance. And the answer was given to us by the officer. It is very clear that it has that historical significance. It has that significance because that has remained or has endured as a 19th century plot or garden over these many years. This particular landscape is also associated with the estate. It is quite a significant estate. Furthermore, this landscape, which has remained with us from the 19th century, also communicates to us in the 21st century. So there is that linkage, that connection that we have. The second issue is this: whether building on this grass area or landscape constitutes demolition under the provisions of clause E13.7.1P1 and E13.8.1P1B. And the answer is very clear. The clause states this, that the demolition must not result in the loss of significant fabric, form, items, or landscape elements. Now, in this particular clause, it is very clear. It is the officer is referring to the landscape elements which constitutes grass, lawns, and garden. And therefore, we should not demolish this. It is significant. It is like, if I may draw an example, we go to Port Arthur and we see green grass and lawns. We don't start building there because it is not going to be appropriate. Therefore, I would like to foreshadow the motion.
30 seconds.
I'd like to foreshadow the motion that the recommendation made by the officer of refusal be considered. Thank you.
Okay, I note that motion. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This so-called landscape element isn't able to be seen from the road, nor is there any indication that the original house, the Spod's house, who apparently is an important historic figure, the current Stoke House Lodge is a later period, 1870s, 80s, that period. This plot of land and so-called demolition of this plot of land is hidden behind hedges. It is also on the secondary, was the secondary entrance to the main big sandstone house that's there at present. The Heritage Council has given approval, subject to conditions. To us, it is a very, very, very long bow, I believe, that the Heritage Officer, Cultural Heritage Officer, has given us. We've had an alternate heritage consideration by, again, a very respected architect in this area. And it is significant. There are no objections. There are no objections from the current owner of the big house next door. You won't be able to see the house, or if you can see very minor parts of the house, it's a single-storey house. All the time, we lose some backyards, green space, all around Hobart. That's inevitable that it will happen. To me, this is a minor loss of some landscape elements. The major landscape elements have been gone 50, 60, 100 years ago. This will not contribute at all. No one will notice it's gone. It will be an add to the housing stock of Hobart. And I think it is telling. I know I have a different opinion than Councillor Dutta. It is telling that no community group, no neighbour has a representation against this. And I think if we're only relying on an opinion of our officer, our heritage officer, or a cultural heritage officer, and we've got an alternate opinion as opposite to that person, I think you do weigh the community view. So I believe you do weigh the community view, and to me, it would be a waste that we reject this application. So I would encourage the council, elected members, to support the recommendation that came from the committee, which Councillor Dutta is a member. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Next is Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question at this stage. Page 22 of the report does speak about the architectural, the potential architectural works that might need to be done if this was to be approved, and it was given, I think, as one of the concerns and reasons for recommending refusal by the officers. I do note that, as Alderman Briscoe said, the application was recommended for approval by the Heritage Council. I'm just trying to work out, I suppose, the difference in opinion on as to whether or not the need for archaeological works is a reason to refuse or something that should be considered if anything popped up. And I suppose the difference of opinion in, you know, the question of significance between the Heritage Council and the council officers.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Lord Mayor, if you wish me to. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Nye.
Yeah, look, the issue of archaeological significance is, you know, a valid issue, but not one that under the planning scheme that we have jurisdiction in this area. So hence why there was not a grounds of refusal concerning that matter. In relation to I suppose, difference in opinion between the Heritage Council and council officers, it's not uncommon for there to be differences of opinion on these matters. We have two different rule books, I suppose, under which we determine these applications. Ours is the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, 2015. The Heritage Council aren't obliged to consider applications under that scheme. They have a general, I suppose, area of control under their specific act, and that does not make reference to that planning scheme. So we've got a set of, I suppose, criteria in which to determine the application, and the officers have duly done that and determined that it doesn't satisfy those provisions. Thank you.
Alderman Brackus, have you got further questions, or would you like to say something?
No, Lord Mayor, happy to leave my comments to the summing up.
Oh, okay. Who's next? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question, and it follows on from some of which you've already answered, Mr. Noy, but through you, Lord Mayor, to either Mr. Noy or Ms. Baines. The planning scheme does have as part of its brief or its jurisdiction heritage matters, does it not?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's an important component to the City of Hobart interim planning scheme.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And is there a similar garden or a similar sort of place elsewhere in Hobart under the jurisdiction of the interim planning scheme?
Look, I'm not sure in relation to this type of estate, but as you heard Ms. Baines mention, that in this specific area, this is this type of estate, even though it is only partially retained, is very significant and has specific reference within the scheme accordingly.
I see. And as you said, the Tasmanian Heritage Council considers things differently, and what Councillor Data has said is verified in relation to this matter.
Sorry, in terms of verified,
different interpretations from the THC versus what the planning scheme.
Yeah, look, most definitely. And these matters are often tested at the Planning Appeal Tribunal. And we have had instances where the Heritage Council has approved a proposal. We have recommended refusal. Those matters have been tested before the tribunal, and Council's decision to refuse the application has been upheld on a number of occasions.
Yes, I take that point. I think it's a really important point. I'd just like to make a couple of observations, and I'll reflect on what comedian Luke McGregor has said recently about the value of the arts. Now, the value of the arts is completely undervalued and brings a lot of importance to our cultural and everyday life. And there's probably no denying it, but it has been completely undervalued. And I see this with time and time again in relation to heritage matters and heritage matters that are being undercut, undervalued by this council. And we've already heard comments to say what sort of lack of importance this is. Quite contrary to the professional opinion of our officers. Now, the officers don't come with refusals just for any old reason. In fact, we have such a tiny amount of refusals that our planning committee and council decide upon. And I think that we are undervaluing the heritage values of our city, and this is a prime example of what we have before us. So I will be supporting a motion, the foreshadowed motion for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, let me begin. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I guess I'm one of the Evangelines that heard a deputation from the applicant in the planning committee meeting. Look, obviously quite fascinating, and the fact that this site exists next to the Stoke House is obviously of interest to people. But we did hear very strong presentation, if you like, deputation, from a very experienced cultural assessor when a they ran through, but this is being knocked back on, or recommended for refusal on social cultural heritage grounds, I think it was, and a very strong case was put, but in this instance, there was no social heritage value being lost. I mean, the site itself is not visible to the street. No one, if it did have social heritage value, no one put a representation in against it. And we did hear that, obviously, this is, from my point of view, this is someone who owns a plot of land, is looking to develop it as their right. It's not being proposed as a short-term accommodation or anything. The current owners of a Stoke House had every opportunity to put in deputations against. They didn't. We heard that, nearby on the site, there's some very old trees and all that sort of thing. These aren't getting touched. It literally is just a piece of grass. And frankly, I agreed with the speaker we heard, the applicant, who gave us a very thorough rundown of how, in this case, they had erred in their assessing around whether it's got social, cultural heritage values. And look, as I said, I'm one of the lucky ones who got to hear that presentation, but I think there is a reason why the planning committee, in this instance, did see the light to move this for approval. And so I would say that I would let you know that I'll be voting against refusal of this application. And I think if council were to refuse it, there is every possibility that it will be overturned. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Coates. You'll be, just to clarify, you'll be voting for the recommendation before us, Councillor Coates, I think, because we've got a recommendation
to approve. Are we speaking to the motion from Councillor Dura?
You're speaking to the motion from Alderman Barakis. That's the motion in front of us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Deputy Lord Mayor, did you...
Point of explanation, although I was quite unwell last Monday, just to point out to Councillor Coates, I was listening in and I did hear the very strong arguments put before us.
Thanks.
But to say that, if you're not there, you don't know what's happening is a bit irresponsible.
Point of order, Lord
Okay,
Mayor,
thank you. No, that's it was a point of explanation, I think, on behalf of Deputy Lord Mayor, which they are allowed so long as they don't go for too long. So we've moved on now, and the next person is Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Question to the Director of Planning. When someone purchases a parcel of land or a block of land or a house, is the onus on them to find out what the heritage aspects of it are? Like when the owners of this, the gatehouse and this block of land, would they have been informed, or should they have known that they were purchasing a parcel of land that would be very difficult to develop because of its heritage listing?
Through you, Lord Mayor, they would normally be informed through the 337 certificate process what the zoning and planning scheme provisions apply to that location, and whether it's listed on the Tasmanian Heritage Register. It's not to say that because it's listed that it's necessarily difficult to redevelop, but it certainly does bring into play and into focus additional provisions that would apply to this site because of its heritage significance. So that would have flagged to some degree some areas of caution that they would need to take around compromising those heritage values.
Okay, thanks, Director. Just a brief comment. It appears that a number of the committee placed more value on a hired consultant's opinion, which is fine, than they did on the officer's opinion. So I just wanted to point out that the hired consultant did praise themselves quite significantly, that they had much more experience than the City of Hobart heritage planners. So I thought that was a bit disingenuous in order to set the scene. But I'm inclined to go with the heritage planners from the City of Hobart. So I will be supporting the foreshadowed motion. Our heritage planners don't have a vested interest or a significant interest in it other than protecting the heritage of Hobart. versus the proponent consultants who are paid basically to promote the application, which is their job. But I will be supporting the council, the officer's recommendation for refusal should the first motion before us fail.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coates and Councillor Harvey, could you just put your hands down now, please, so I can keep track of hands? Councillor Dutta, you've got your hand raised again. Is that for a question?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Yes.
I've got two questions. Question number one, through you, Lord Mayor, can this be defended at the tribunal?
Mr. Noy.
You're saying the motion before us or the foreshadowed motion?
The foreshadowed motion, the recommendation by the officer.
Oh, yes, most definitely, Lord Mayor. We would be happy to defend our professional opinion.
And the second question is this: under which clauses have this been refused? Was it under social or cultural clauses? Because I haven't seen it anywhere.
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor. No, it's and this has been emphasised certainly by the applicant's consultant, and the reality is that the recommendation is about the loss of the physical landscape. It's not about its social importance. It's a physical landscape that will be lost as a result of this development, and they are the provisions on which this is recommended or has been recommended by the officers. It's specifically clause E13.7.1 P1 and E13.8.1 P1 subclause B.
Thank you. So it's a demolition of the garden. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, through you to Mr. Noy, could you please advise me what the Heritage Council actually recommended?
Mr. Noy.
Through you, Lord Mayor, they recommended approval of the proposal.
Okay, so it's been mentioned that our council officers versus the paid heritage people from the proponent, who should we believe? But at the end of the day, there's argument between two professionals, being our own heritage officer and a paid heritage officer, which is quite understandable. They have a point of difference. Yes, of course, the proponents is paid, and of course our officers are doing their utmost. But here we have an independent organisation, the Heritage Council, and I've argued this time and time again in the chamber. Now I'm arguing it on Zoom. But we have the Heritage Council, who I believe is a far more leading organisation to provide us independent advice in respect of heritage, saying that they approve it. So I believe that in itself would be a very good argument in a tribunal should it go that way. I don't believe this is a fait accompli that everybody feels or believes in, that if this matter went to tribunal. So look, I'm sorry, this, the argument that was put forward about the paid heritage architect is actually demeaning for that professional. And I am not in any way demeaning our professional. I believe they are both professionals in their right. But there is the Heritage Council who is saying they approve this. And I think that is food for thought.
Thank you. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question through you to the Director. As we've already heard, that the Heritage Council has approved it, and then our heritage officers have refused it. So I'm just wondering, were they approved and refused on the same grounds or the same criteria?
Mr. Noy, I think you might have answered this one before,
yes.
but give it another go.
Yeah, look, the criteria under which we assess the heritage significance are contained within the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme in 2015. That is not the same criteria that the Heritage Council determines. They determine the application under. They determine it under a different act and a different set of criteria. So there are different sets of criteria that both jurisdictions determine this matter under, which does present some confusion. It's understood, but at the end of the day, Council has the responsibility of determining the application under the provisions of the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. So just to reiterate, it was based on the interim planning scheme and very different criteria, and it's been refused on that ground. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
That's correct.
Okay, so I can see no more hands up. So I'll just ask Alderman Brackus if you'd like to briefly sum up the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you. Look, there's a few things I suppose to unpack there. And I suppose the first one was the nature of the lack of representations. And I think that also goes to one of the questions I think put by or asked by Councillor Dutta. The reality is, you know, when we talk about what the lack of representations mean, the lack of opposition meant that there was no opposition. I think that's as clear as that can possibly be put. And the aspect, as far as talking about what's the more defensible avenue for the council to take as a planning authority, I think it's relevant to note that, you know, if we vote to refuse this application, then the question is it defensible in the appeals tribunal if the applicant chooses to appeal it, which the director said that he believes it is, and that's fine. But the flip side of that is, if we voted to approve this tonight, based on the fact that there was no community opposition to this at all, there's no risk or chance of an appeal. So if we're talking about what from a risk management perspective, from a good governance perspective, the route that we take that's of the least risk to us as a council would be to approve this. I think when we speak about the significance of the area, which is ultimately I think is where this debate comes down to. I think the big point of contention here is whether or not we as a planning authority, whether or not the officers or the other parties involved think that the landscape in question is ultimately significant. And look, we've got council experts on this, the council officers on this that have a view, but like many things, whether it's medicine or economics or other fields, you do get situations where you have one expert that's eminently qualified that has one opinion on something, and you have another expert that's eminently qualified that has a contending viewpoint. I think it'd be silly to say that neither one of those are qualified or anything like that, but ultimately we do have a situation where the facts that are before us as far as interpretation of the landscape, interpretation of the history and what's connected to what. We have effectively three parties here. One is the council officers, one is the applicant's heritage consultant, and the other one is the Heritage Council, that all have differing views. And we have a case where two of them have said that, with the appropriate conditions, they'd be happy for this.
30 seconds, Alderman Brackus.
Thank you. And one of them has said that they're not comfortable. So I think ultimately we need to take our own decision, and we need to listen to what we've been told. And my view is, I think, especially given what's being proposed to be built there, the best option for us, the least risky option for us, is to go with the motion that we've got in front of us from the committee, and that is, I think, reflective of the council, the community's interest in this. I think if we had no representations, I think that's a sign of the community's interest in this.
That's time, Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go around and ask your vote, because I think there'll be a difference of votes in this matter. So, Deputy Lord Mayor, how do you vote?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas. Alderman Thomas, just need you to unmute.
Sorry, 4.
Okay, thanks, Alderman Thomas. Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Barakis.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Ewan.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock.
Against.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote against.
So, yeah, it's a 6-6 vote, so it's lost. So we move to the foreshadow.
Okay, so we'd need the detail of the foreshadowed motion and a seconder. Councillor Dutta, you've got a motion. I understand. Do you have a motion?
Lord Mayor, I don't have it in front of me, but I would simply ask the director if you could refer to the recommendation made by...
Oh, okay, the original recommendation. Okay. Does anyone want that brought up, or are people happy just to go with what's the... just raise your hand if you want that brought up. Otherwise, it is in the planning report, I think.
Page 25, Lord Mayor.
Okay, I don't see any hands up, so I think we can proceed on the basis that it's the... Alderman Zuko, did you want...
Yes, Lord Mayor, I have a question through you to the director.
Yes.
My question is, Director, what would be the estimated cost to council to defend a decision in the tribunal, please?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it would just be officer time in relation to this one if it was in support of the officer recommendation. So,
okay. Before we get into questions and debate, I would like to actually get the motion before us. So we've got Councillor Dutta is moving the original motion to the planning committee, so everyone's clear on exactly what the motion is. And I think Deputy Lord Mayor has seconded that. So now, if you would like to speak to Councillor Dutta's motion, I think Alderman Barakis, you've got your hand up.
Lord Mayor, I asked a question. I still have a subsidiary question to answer.
Sorry, I thought you...
No, I hadn't finished. You just interrupted.
Well, I was just trying to get the motion before us. Okay, so you've got a question for Mr. Noy, please proceed.
Yes, I've got another question to Mr. Noy. Mr. Noy stated that this will just be officer time, so we will not be seeking any external advice or any external legal advice. Could we get an estimated cost on officer time to defend this, please?
yes, Lord Mayor, look, it would be in the order of $4,000 to $5,000 of officer time to defend this matter if it went to full hearing.
Okay, Lord Mayor, I'd just like to ensure that in whatever motion is approved, I'd like to move an amendment that should this matter go to tribunal, that a report be provided to the council on the actual cost to defend any tribunal hearing should this proceed to the tribunal. I move that as an amendment.
Thank you. I'm just making sure that that's been captured adequately. And I'm looking for a seconder. Is that your hand up, Alderman Barakis, for a seconding?
My hand up was up to speak. I'm happy to second it, but I think Alderman Briscoe got it.
Oh, Alderman Briscoe's your hand's up for that.
No,
okay.
no, my hand up was to
no, all right. So I think Alderman Barakis, you're happy to second it?
Happy to second, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so we've got an amendment from Alderman Zuko, seconded by Alderman Barakis. Could you just read that out for us to make sure we've got that?
Point of order, Lord Mayor. I don't think Alderman Barakis can second anything. He moved the motion, the original.
No.
That's been lost.
That's been lost. So we've moved on to a new motion. Okay, so I need the motion by Alderman Zuko read out to us, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The amendment is that in the event of an appeal against the council's decision, the cost of the officer's representation at such appeal be reported to the council.
Okay, so we have that amendment. Would anyone like to speak to that amendment? I've got a lot of hands up. So I think Alderman Briscoe is first. Alderman Briscoe, are you speaking to the amendment or the substantive motion?
Lord Mayor, under your new rules, I was going to speak to the original motion, but you won't allow us to. So
no, I will allow you to, but we'll deal with the amendment first, if you wouldn't mind, Alderman Briscoe.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I will speak to the
substantive motion. Great. I'll come back to you in a minute. So would anyone like to speak to Alderman Zuko's amendment? Alderman Harvey. Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. The council goes through this process of appeals a number of times in any given year. That's just part of the nature of planning. So I also think we get a report on a regular basis about the cost of appeals. I know we get a regular update on all the appeals that council's going through. So do we get a costing as well with those appeals through you, Lord Mayor, to the Director?
Mr. Noy?
Lord Mayor, I know we provide a regular update of appeals. I don't know whether we, unless specifically requested, nominate the actual cost of the appeals.
Yeah, sure. All right. Okay, look.
Sorry, just one moment. We've got General Manager who would like to speak.
I cannot hear the General Manager.
Oh, General Manager, unmute and try again.
Still cannot hear the General Manager.
Apologies, General Manager. I think your microphone's like a fair way away from your mouth. That might be the issue.
Okay, he was just saying that normally they don't report on their costs unless requested by council. So, okay, so now...
Lord Mayor, considering we're going down the track of a massive budget deficit, I think it's appropriate.
Thanks, Alderman Zuko.
I'll just make a comment about the amendment. What we're discussing here is the officer's recommendation. So this is, the onus is on the proponent to appeal the decision against us. We're just holding up the officer's recommendation. That's all we're doing. So I don't need a costing at this point because we don't know whether or not there will be an appeal because we have strong grounds of refusal. So whether the proponent decides to appeal is up to them. But we are not defending anything at the moment other than we're just approving the officer's recommendation to refuse the application as per the planning scheme, which says that this is not allowed in that particular area. So there's nothing to appeal at the moment. We're not appealing anything. They'll be appealing us.
Point of clarification, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Zuko.
My amendment was very clear that that stated that should they appeal.
Okay. All right. So we now is there anyone else who is keen to speak to the amendment from Alderman Zuko? I can see that Deputy Lord Mayor's put her hand up. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, through you to the General Manager, if he can speak. Are we not considering a planning item, and does this amendment actually fall out of the jurisdiction of a planning item?
General Manager. Can you hear me now, Lord Mayor? I can hear you. Can everyone else hear me?
Cannot hear.
Perhaps, Lord Mayor, if you mute yourself, it might be easier to hear the GM.
I don't think so.
I think, Nick, you've got your microphone's on mute, even though your Zoom application's not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Councillor Coates, you're worth your weight in gold. So the question...
And again, it's just turning on the mic.
Oh, fantastic. Look, provided it doesn't go to the heart of the issue that we're discussing, the application we're discussing, Lord Mayor, then I don't have a problem with the amendment. It's just seeking clarity on costs, but provided it's not directly relevant to the merits of the planning application, then it's fine.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? I've got, if you could put your hand down if you don't want to speak to the amendment. Okay, Alderman Baracus, you'd like to speak to the amendment?
I suppose just a question, just I'm a bit, just so I'm all good, sorry. If I speak to the amendment, I can still speak to the substantive motion? Okay, good. Thank you then, Lord Mayor. Look, I just want to clarify, I suppose, what the intent of the motion, the amendment is, and Alderman Zuko is free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. We're clearly on the path to making a decision on this that's looking quite obvious. This is, I suppose, simply a matter of, if this does go to appeals, this is intended to provide some sort of transparency as to the cost of the decisions that we're making as a council. I don't see the downside to that. This is something that I imagine the council officers would already be aware of such costs if they were to occur, and I think it's simply reasonable that we are, as elected members, and the public are informed of the, I suppose, the costs of the decisions that we make as a council. I won't speak to the item yet as well. I'll wait for that to come up in the substantive motion, but this is, I suppose, relevant to the public's interest to know what the cost is in the decisions that we make as a council and the planning authority.
Okay.
Can I also have another point of clarification for Alderman Baracus, considering he made the point about my...
Yes, point of clarification, Alderman Zuko.
The main point is in the basis that there is no other third-party objections to this application, and there'd be no other third party that would seek to participate.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move. We're going to just vote on this amendment to start with. This is the amendment from Alderman Zuko, seconded by Alderman Baracus. So I'll just go around and see what your vote is. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Zuko.
For.
Alderman Briscoe.
For.
Alderman Sexton.
For.
Alderman Thomas.
For.
Alderman Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Baracus.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Ewan.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock.
Against.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote against.
So, Lord Mayor, that's lost 6-6.
Okay, we're going back now to the motion in front of us, which is moved by Councillor Dutta, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. It is the motion, the original motion that went to the Planning Committee. Would anyone desperately like to speak to this? And Alderman Briscoe's got his hand up, and he did want to speak. So yes, Alderman Briscoe. Alderman Briscoe, we just need you to unmute, please.
Okay. It is sad that we've got to 6-6 votes. It demonstrates to the community, if we continue this, that we're divided, maybe along partisan or not partisan lines, but definitely divided. That is sad. This council last year, a lot of waving of our hands, how great we were to do things to do with homelessness. Not that we've effectively done anything except wave our hands. And here is, we're about to have a 6-6 vote, presumably, may not happen, but let's say if it did, that we're actually saying no to more housing in Hobart. And knowing that the community aren't interested in any objections to this site having a house on it. No neighbours have put in a representation against, even the most immediate neighbour, which would be the one who would be the most affected with Stoke Lodge. So I think it's a really sad thing, and the community will see the hypocrisy of us saying no to further housing in a situation where there is a housing crisis. We've waved our hands, and here we may be in a moment voting against more housing in Hobart in an area not disputed by the community. I think it's very sad, and I hope one of the councillors will change their mind and think a balance. Yes, another house in the community to help the housing crisis is better than sticking to a partisan vote. And it makes me sad that we've got to this stage. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Alderman Brackus has got his hand up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'll just suppose echo something that Alderman Briscoe said. We're going down a road where it looks like anyway, at the risk of preempting the council, we will be rejecting an application for a housing development that had zero representations against it. I think that's an important factor to consider. If this was to be approved, nobody would be coming for the council or coming for an appeal on the decision. It's I think a bit sad that we've got to this point, especially because there is such a diversity of views from experts in the field as to the significance of this. And I'll touch on something that the Deputy Lord Mayor said in the previous motion. Not everything that is of a certain age is important heritage. And the issue is for us as elected members and members of the community to make to distinguish between issues of important heritage and things that are, I suppose, just old. There are very many sites and buildings of important heritage to the city. I think there'd be riots on the street if we talked about knocking down anything in Salamanca or any of those, very well-known historical buildings, but not everything that's past a certain age is important heritage. And I think the wide diversity of views from the experts as to the actual significance of what we're effectively talking about is a lawn, versus the impact that this is going to have, versus the benefits that this is going to have. I do note that one of the relevant planning clauses that we're talking about does mention, no loss of heritage substance, unless the cultural community or economic benefit is greater than the heritage lost. And I think if we're talking about, as Alderman Briscoe said, adding more housing at a time when we so crucially need it, on top of a site that has such a debatable level of significance, I think this is a matter of priority for us as elected members. I think the lack of opposition from a community where, as I've said before, the heritage. The members of the community that are interested in heritage tend to be quite outspoken when important heritage matters come up in planning. I think we've all seen that. They do tend to be quite outspoken, and good luck to them for that. But I think their silence here, I think, is deafening. And I think there is the real question as to, what is the real significance of this? What are we losing by refusing this? And what's the cost going to be to council and the city? Not just from a financial perspective as far as the inevitable appeal that's going to come out of this, but what's the loss going to be to the city if we don't progress with this and we end up with I suppose, a lawn? So look, I'll be voting against the motion put by Councillor Dutton. I'd be urging everybody else to do the same.
Okay, if Alderman Briscoe, is your hand up for a reason? Alderman Briscoe, no. And Alderman, so Councillor Harvey, you're next, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thanks, Lord Mayor. Just a quick comment. What we're doing is upholding the officer's recommendation here. The argument seems to have been turned around that we're not supporting the officer's recommendation, that we're going against a housing project. What we're doing, we're supporting the officer's recommendation to refuse this project. So, and the crisis really is that we don't listen to expert advice as often as we should, which is, in this case, the heritage officer's recommendation.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. That's disingenuous. There's been multiple experts.
Sorry, Alderman Brackus, that's a point of opinion rather than a point of order. So no, I won't call that as a point of order. Just continue, Councillor Harvey.
So the officer's recommendation here is that we refuse this, and that might be the case now if this is a 6-6 tie. I understand that will mean the recommendation will revert to the officer's recommendation. So if that's the case, I think, through you, Lord Mayor, to the Director.
Mr. Noy.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, if a council doesn't make a determination within the consideration period, then I do have a delegation to make a determination on council's behalf. And it would be, yeah, it's correct to say that I'll be guided by the qualified advice.
Okay, and I'm guided by the qualified advice as well. And I hope that there are some people around the table tonight that are prepared to accept the qualified officer's advice and refuse the application or support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, so Alderman Briscoe, have you got your hand up again for a question? No, you don't. No. Okay. And Councillor Harvey, you'll put your hand down if you wouldn't mind, please. Councillor Dutta, would you like to sum up, or because
if there's no one else speaking,
I'll just see if anyone else wants to speak, and then you can sum up on your motion. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion before Councillor Dutta sums up? No. All right. Councillor Dutta.
Lord Mayor, there are a number of points that have been made, and I appreciate it. And it's a healthy debate to have this discussion. To be sad is an emotive expression, and I quite understand the emotions. Some people are hurt. Some people are sad because there is a division. But these are the facts of life. We cannot continue that just because we have a division, I'm so sad. Secondly, this matter is not about rejecting housing development. Again, it's a misguided misinterpretation, focusing on something which is really not the motion. The motion is very different. And the motion is simply saying...
Point of order, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Briscoe.
If this is not to reject housing, what is it?
That's not, sorry, Alderman Briscoe, that is not a point of order.
Yes, it is. There's an untruth being said.
That might be, no.
An untruth being said.
That's not a point of order, I'm afraid.
This is a refusal of a housing development.
That's not a point of order. That's maybe a point of explanation.
To go ahead and say this is not a housing development. It is a housing development. What is it? If
that's not a point of order, Alderman Briscoe. Well, my ruling on that is that it's not a point of order. Please continue, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Let me just finish by saying this, that the council staff have refused it on the basis of the fact that 2 clauses, the requirements have not been met. Simply as that. Because the requirements have not been met, they have refused it. It is a qualified opinion, it's an expert opinion, and therefore I will support it. And I hope others will do as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go around and put the motion moved by Councillor Dutta. Deputy Lord Mayor.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko.
I'm not sad. I'm just concerned
Alderman
about the
Zuko,
cost.
just your vote, please.
Again.
Alderman Briscoe.
Against the refusal of a housing development.
All right. Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Barakis.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For, but against rhetoric.
Councillor Coates.
Against, Lord Mayor.
And I will vote for.
Okay, Lord Mayor. May I just have a say?
Yes.
As Mr. Noy said, well, as I'm saying, there are 2 options before the council now. One is, Lord Mayor, that it's open for you, if you so wish, to accept another motion, because there is effectively no motion before you. So someone could move another motion. If that's seconded, that can be debated. Or alternatively, if there is no further motions, then Mr. Noy is absolutely correct. The officers will now proceed to determine this matter under delegation.
Question, Lord Mayor.
I got my hand up for a motion.
Sorry, Alderman Zurko's got his hand up.
My motion, Lord Mayor, is that I believe it's time that the Hobart City Council decided that it no longer wants to be the planning authority, and a right to the state government for the Hobart City Council to give up its planning authority.
Look, I'd probably want to see that in writing, Alderman Zuko. That's quite a major motion.
It's regarding a planning. We're on planning. I question through you to the general manager.
As I said, I would like to see that in writing, Alderman Zurko. And if
Oh,
you're
well,
able
Lord
to put it up
Mayor,
in writing,
you know,
that's...
I'd like to ask a question to the General Manager. General Manager, is my motion, is the motion before us about a planning matter?
It's not up to the General Manager. It's up to me as the chair of this meeting, Alderman
I'm just
Zurko.
asking a General Manager a question.
Well, the General Manager isn't, is it the person who needs to decide about the motion is myself as the chair, and I'm asking you if you'd like to put that motion, I would like to see it in writing.
Lord
and I think
Mayor,
everyone else,
that's
and
fine.
I think everyone else
I
in
am
this
not
meeting
disputing
would as well.
you have the right to make the determination on a motion, but I'm still entitled to ask the General Manager a question.
Yes, you are about, okay, but just, if you
I'm
can just
asking
do it
the
through
General
me,
Manager a question on planning.
if you can do it through me, and I'll see if the General
Through
Manager
you
wants to respond
to the General Manager, may I ask a question, please?
Point of clarification, please, for Alderman Zurko. Isn't the normal process for motions such as this, especially quite a large one, to go to committee first?
Alderman
Not really.
Zurko, do you want to? Okay. All right. So, Alderman Zurko, your question that you would like to ask through the to the General Manager, could you just let me know what it is?
Lord Mayor, my question is through you to the General Manager, and I'll ask the General Manager the question. Thank you.
And proceed, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. General Manager, through the Lord Mayor to you, I would like to ask the question, are we discussing a matter of planning at this particular point in time?
General Manager, would you like to respond to that question?
When the Lord Mayor introduced part 9 of the agenda before us tonight, Lord Mayor, you made it clear that the council was sitting as planning authority, and we continue to do so.
Okay.
My secondary question, Lord Mayor.
Very quickly, Alderman Zurko, because we have other matters that are on our agenda that I think people would like decisions on. So, Alderman Zurko, what is your second question?
Lord Mayor, I haven't held this up. There's been other aldermen and elected members.
I'm not blaming you for holding it up. I'm just asking you to ask your question.
General Manager, was my question relative to a planning matter? Sorry, I rephrase. Was my motion relative to a planning matter?
Your unseconded motion, as I recall it, Alderman Zurko, through you, Lord Mayor, was related to planning authority issues. So it is within the confines of what we're discussing at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to 9.2 and invite Alderman Barakis to...
Lord Mayor, I did have my hand up about an alternate motion. My view is that we should consider, because the council is divided, to send this back to committee to get a decision from the committee. Now, I've got a question to the General Manager.
So this is an alternative motion on item 9.1.
That's correct. Yes, because I think the Palace Hotel, which you recall is now almost complete or fairly close to complete, we asked for more time to make a decision, and it came back positive, and the Palace Hotel is now being built.
Okay.
So
your proposal.
I ask a question to the General Manager or Mr. Noy. Is it possible to contact the applicant to ask for more time? I know the expiry date is the 15th of July. Is it possible to ask because my alternate motion would be to defer the matter, because we haven't made a decision, back to the planning committee?
Look, Lord Mayor, the short answer to that question is yes, it can be referred back to the planning committee.
Okay.
But Alderman Briscoe is absolutely correct. In the absence of an extension of time, I will ask Mr. Noy to exercise his delegation and make a determination.
Okay, so would you like...
Lord Mayor, in other cases, the director have contacted the applicant.
We understand, Alderman Briscoe. So would you like to move for a deferral?
I move to deferral, and deferral of the item that's in front of us at the moment, so the director can contact the applicant to ask for more time.
Yes, okay. Okay, so deferral motion moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by who would like to second the deferral motion?
Happy to second, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Barakis. Okay, so could everyone just take their hands down while we deal with the procedural motion, which takes priority? Okay, so I'm moving a deferral motion on the item back to committee. All those in favour, I'll come around and ask what your vote is. What was that? Sorry, Mrs. Johns? Oh, well, what's Alderman Briscoe? What is it? We can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
Unmute, right. The first thing we have to do is to just defer the item for time for Mr. Noy to contact the applicant.
We understand. It's a deferral motion.
The committee, yeah. So
okay.
Defer, and then Mr. Noy will report back later in the committee. Yes, the applicant is prepared to give us more time.
Okay, Alderman. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Alderman Briscoe, are you saying do this tonight?
Yeah, the first thing we have to do is get an extension of time. That means that I'm just deferring this item to time enough for the director to contact the applicant to ask for more time.
Okay, we've got it.
Yeah.
You clear?
All right. Just a clarification, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Sherlock.
More time to do what? I'm sort of. I honestly don't understand this deferral process. It went up, it was lost, then it came back.
All right, so we can't defer, we can't debate a deferral motion, but I think the General Manager would like to say something.
Look, as I understand it, Lord Mayor, what Alderman Briscoe is asking for is that we effectively defer this item at the moment and return to it later in the agenda tonight, once Mr. Noy has contacted the applicant to see whether or not the applicant is prepared to grant an extension of time. So it's not a deferral to a committee. It's effectively a deferral from tonight's agenda until Mr. Noy comes back, and we'll return to it later tonight with that answer. Is that correct, Lord Mayor?
I think that's what you're expecting, Alderman Briscoe?
That's the normal procedure that we normally have, yes, in planning items.
Well, then, Lord Mayor, we move on to the next item.
Okay.
Yes, but I still need to put the deferral motion, don't I?
Lord Mayor, I'm not happy about that at all. We have made a decision, and I have an alternative motion.
Point of order. Point of order. We have.
No. I'm just going to let the Deputy Lord Mayor say her.
A point of order you've got to deal with. We haven't made a decision. That's the point.
Okay. No, it's all a bit of a muddle. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put Alderman Briscoe's deferral motion. Okay, so who would like to vote in favour of the deferral motion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Zuko. What was that?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For.
Alderman Sexton.
For.
Alderman Thomas.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Barakis.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Ewan.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock.
Against.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'm going to vote against. Okay, so we are now going to move on. Yes.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Lord Mayor. That is another 6-6 vote, so it's lost. And I think the deputy does have a alternate motion that she may want to put to you, Lord Mayor.
Yes, thank you, General Manager. If I may, Lord Mayor, I move that the matter be delegated to the Director of Planning in this.
Don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't think that's.
Lord Mayor, there's no need for that. It's an automatic.
I don't think that's required, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Discussion then, Alderman Zuko.
Okay, so I think.
What was that, Lord Mayor?
Excuse me. I'm just going to ask.
Deputy, I'd like to clarify what the deputy just made comment, please.
No, I think what I'd like to do right now is ask the General Manager just to clarify what will happen to this item now. Could you, or Mr. Noy, please?
Lord Mayor, Mr. Noy has outlined what will happen, and I just want to endorse that as General Manager, that there is effectively no decision taken tonight. So the officers have delegation under section 6 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act from this council to make decisions that where there is no decision taken by the council. So we will now seek to exercise that delegation and make a decision. And I think Mr. Noyes indicated what that decision may be.
Okay, thank you. And we're moving on now to the next item, which is 9.2, 11 Swan Street, North Hobart. I'll ask Alderman Briscoe to open this, Alderman Baracus to open this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I'll move item 9.2, 11 Swan Street.
Oh, sorry, Deputy's declared an interest. We'll just leave, ask Deputy to leave the meeting briefly and leave the room and then come back in. Okay, Alderman Baracus. Alderman Baracus, you just need to unmute yourself and...
Apologies. Try again. Look, thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy to move item 9.2, 11 Swan Street, North Hobart.
Seconded by Councillor Ewan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory and hopefully pretty straightforward. The application is for partial demolition, alteration, and extension of landscaping and car parking at 11 Swan Street. I'll leave it at that, Lord Mayor, because I think this one's pretty cut and dry.
Alderman Briscoe, you've got your hand up to speak. Alderman Briscoe, you just need to unmute. Alderman Briscoe, we're just still waiting on you to unmute, please. Did you want to speak to this item? Oh, no, hands down.
I was going to second it, Lord Mayor, but...
Oh, I see. Good-o. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Okay, there are no hands raised, so I will see if anyone would like to vote against this item. If you'd like to raise your hand against this item. Okay, so there are no hands against this item. General Manager? Carried unanimously.
Carried unanimously, Lord Mayor, and maybe we can ask Craig to return the deputy.
Yes. Let's wait for the deputy to come back and moving on to item 9.3, Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy to move item 9.3, 55 Runnymede Street, Battery Point.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Thank you. Yeah, Lord Mayor, another simple one, hopefully another straightforward one. There's an application for partial demolition and alterations at 55 Runnymede Street, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, would anyone like to speak to this item? Alderman Briscoe? Just Alderman Briscoe, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Someone has seconded that. Look, just a brief comment. Personally, as an aesthetic point of view, I wouldn't have minded the shutters. I've got shutters on my own house, makes it look better. But there's no historic evidence that shutters were there at the beginning. So I agree with the officers. I think the other parts of the application are fine. So I will be supporting the motion for approval.
Okay. Any further discussion? I can't see any hands up. So I'm going to see, is anyone against this motion? Raise your hand. Would anyone like to vote against the approval of this item? I can't see any hands, so that looks as though that's a unanimous vote. So thank you everyone for that. Right, so that's the end of our planning matters for tonight, and I'm moving on now to the City Infrastructure Committee and invite the chairman of that committee, Councillor Harvey, to open the first item, which is request for speed limit reductions in Hobart CBD district and retail precincts. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'll move the item and call for a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Okay. So, Lord Mayor, basically what we're looking at here is part one, the council endorsed the engagement with key stakeholders and the preparation of supporting documentation to allow submission to the Transport Commissioner requesting the following speed limits changes in the Hobart Business District. I understand that we're looking at an amendment here as well from Alderman Thomas to remove the 30 and make it a uniform 40, which I'll be supporting as well. And also part 2 is the council endorse engagement with key stakeholders and the preparation of supporting document to allow submission to the Transport Commissioner for the following speed limit changes in the suburban retail precincts between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday to Sunday. So it's fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of a convoluted debate around speed limits in Hobart, which has been unfortunate, but that's just the nature of whatever we're doing with regard to this sort of information. But what I'll say though, Lord Mayor, is the proposals to reduce speed limits, which will go to the Transport Commissioner following engagement with the stakeholders, is supported by a number of organisations that I think we need to pay attention to. It's also based on evidence, it's based on data, and it's based on expert advice and best practice from around Australia and around the world, basically. So supporting, we have RACT, the Heart Foundation, Road Safety Advisory Council, Hobart Active Travel Committee, the Road Safety Board from the Road Safety Board from the State Growth. We also have the Menzies Institute, who are arguing the health benefits and the safety benefits of reduced speeds. We've also been advised that by the network operating acting manager, who's developing the network operations plan for the city, that they have no problem with a 40k change in speed or a drop to 40k from 50 in the proposed areas, and that we should also look at a 30k down the track a bit further. But we can do the 40k fairly much, accept that straight away as part of a submission to the Transport Commissioner. But we've also got to keep in mind the reasons for doing this. And in the last few years, we have had 2 people killed. 2 people have died in the CBD, and we've had 11 serious injuries in the last few years. And today, I think all the aldermen would have received an email from a pedestrian that was hit in the last 4 weeks, who's suffering a number of injuries. So if we can reduce the number of injuries and deaths in the city, then we must keep that front of mind. We need to provide a safe environment for our pedestrians and city users and city visitors. So we know full well that reducing speeds reduces the number of crashes. And we've seen that in the city already, where speeds were reduced in some locations, where I think we saw a 17.6% reduction in crashes. And what we've got to remember is that every time there's a crash, that's what causes traffic congestion in the city. So if we reduce the number of crashes, then we also reduce the number of days when there is congestion in the city. Crashes cause congestion. There's also plenty of evidence that slower speeds adds a huge amount of value to our shopping strips and to our high pedestrian areas. So we need to keep that also in front of mind when we're making these decisions. So I'm hopeful that tonight we get a unanimous support for putting this submission to the Transport Commissioner, looking at reducing speeds both in the city and in our suburban shopping strips, because it's a good idea, it's well supported, and time has come. 30 seconds,
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, I've got a hand up from Alderman Thomas. Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I commend the work of the officers in bringing this item forward. Following, as I think someone mentioned earlier today in a note, Girl many years ago talks about a city for people, not necessarily for cars. And I think he used some classic examples where he showed the waterfront full of cars, and I think we're gradually moving away from a dependence on cars being everywhere, and certainly the speed of those vehicles that are left in the CBD. Look, I welcome the fact it's going to consultation. I implore my colleagues after an hour on item 1 that this is for consultation, folks. This is going out for consultation. We don't need 20 observations and 1,500 issues brought. My amendment is simply to reflect the advice that, in actual fact, Alderman Barakis suggested I get through Mr. Noy from the state government. There is a concern by the state government that we move to the 30 immediately before the network operations plan is available. So my amendment is purely, Lord Mayor, to item 1A and 1B, where it mentions 30 in both those subclauses, to move to 40 from 50. So from 50 to 40, not from 50 to 30. I'll seek a seconder for that, please.
Seconder, I think I saw Alderman Briscoe. Was that your hand up, or are you just wanting to speak?
Look, I'll second it, happily second it, and I'll speak when
we get to that. Yeah. Okay. So we've got an amendment from Alderman Thomas and seconded by Alderman Briscoe.
Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Lord Mayor, there's actually, if we refer back to the screen shot.
Okay, we just need to bring that up for everyone.
Bring it back up again, please. I think the wrong document has been put forward. Is it coming back up, Craig?
Is it coming? It's coming back up. Yep.
I think, Lord Mayor, there's a 1.3 sitting there that doesn't need to be there.
Okay, can we just get the screen? It's very similar to the substantive motion, isn't it, Alderman Thomas?
Okay, look, as long as there's no, can you just go to the second page? Is there a second page of that? Or is it just what I'm seeing on the screen now?
Second page, no, second page I think covers Sandy Bay and Newtown.
Okay, but is there anything
going to the 40?
Is there anything at the very bottom about further action?
I'm not sure. We'll just scroll down now. If someone could, if Craig's scrolling down.
That's scrolling up.
There we go.
There is. Yes, Lord Mayor, my eagle eye spotted that. The last piece.
In yellow, in highlighted in yellow.
We don't need that, and that's I've discussed that with a number of people. So that particular part needs to be. Isn't part of my amendment.
Okay, so we've just got the basically the change covers the down to 40. Yeah, right. The 40 right around the CBD, and then those shopping precincts also from 50 to 40. And that's the nature of the amendment. Okay, so would you like to say anything further on your amendment, Alderman Thomas?
No, I'm happy. It simply reflects the common sense approach to take at this point.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, can we have that yellow section so we can see it, and made it very, very clear that it's not in that, I'm a little bit confused.
So we'll just need to go scroll down to the bottom, right down to the bottom to see what's.
If I could just assist the council, Lord Mayor, it's obvious that that's going to happen. It's no need to repeat what's in the law, that we would obviously we'll be taking up discussions with the Transport Commission in due course if any further reductions are proposed after their plan comes out.
So just to clarify, Lord Mayor, in the amendment, part 3 is not part of the amendment, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to speak to this amendment?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Briscoe.
Noting what Alderman Thomas said, that he didn't want 5,000 observations and comments, I think it is important to congratulate Alderman Thomas for bringing this amendment that seems to have got the partisans on side. Look, I have got a question for the appropriate officer. which I think is Mr. Noy. Now, great intentions. We're all for great intentions, and I always believe we should have a more pedestrian-friendly city. And but however, using statistics about deaths in the city, the 2 deaths that are in this appropriate area, is the speed a factor? Was a factor, or was it a distraction by the pedestrian or the car driver? Can I ask that question first to Mr. Noy?
Yeah.
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, we haven't unfortunately got the specific police reports in relation to those unfortunate occurrences, so I can't specifically advise whether speed was a factor. I can, however, indicate that with a reduced speed does afford a greater reaction time where a collision might occur. And I think that that's the general premise here, that reduced speed limits allow a greater reaction time to respond to, to incidents where a crash might occur.
Thank you, Mr. Noy. I'd just like a few comments. I think going to 40 rather than 30 reduces the look. The last week or so, driving around the city or various places that require me to go through the city, I've never got more than 35 kilometres per hour. So I don't think it's going to affect greatly the movement around the city of cars. But however, by having just 2 zones, basically the 2 zones are 50 then to 40, rather than 50 to 40 to 30, and maybe back to 40 and then back to 80. So all I can say is the amendment, and I think it's a good one. It's an evolution, and we've been around long enough, this council, to go for when we went from, I think it was 60 to 50, and that didn't cause too many issues. And now from 50 to 40, I don't think will cause so many issues. People might use it as the cartoon in the paper said today very well, that we might end up being known as slow Hobart, but I think the other term is that we're going to be a safe Hobart as well for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? So no further discussion. Okay, so we can move the amendment and then it'll become the substantive and go back to that if you prefer. So Alderman Alderman Burnett, would you like to wait until we vote talking about it as substantive?
Look, I'll talk about it, talk to the amendment, Lord Mayor.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, I appreciate the amendment and appreciate that Alderman Thomas does get the importance of those changes that Young Girl has suggested over the course of many years, and that transformation of our city is a really important one. So I understand his points of doing this in a very softly approach. I think that that safety is one of the things that we are considering as part of this overall motion, but obviously the amendment reduces or increases the time to get to that point of a safer Hobart. And whilst we might all want to be on the same page, given the previous item 9.1, it is a good thing if we are all on the same page. I suppose that Alderman Zuko has raised the issue of us not being a planning authority tonight and in the past. And to me, I would not like us to have to make these decisions based on safety, which have been unfortunately politicised over the course of this debate, certainly since the Infrastructure Committee meeting. And again, whilst I was unwell last week, I had chance to hear both Gary Bailey and Graham Lynch of the Hart Foundation speak to the committee. I heard what the officers had said as well in bringing a very thoughtful piece to us. We know that 30 kilometres an hour, and there is plenty of evidence out there that people who are in traumatic accidents are going to do much better than somebody who is hit by a car, either in a car or as a pedestrian or as a vulnerable road user. Are going are more likely to survive. And as Councillor Harvey alluded to, we had an email from somebody who was in a traumatic accident, whose experiences, her injuries and her and the loss of productivity, we can see for ourselves of the ripple effect of such injury to a person's family, a person's loved ones, and of course to their work and place in our community. So we really need to be pushing this as hard as we can. It is really important that we get eventually to a slower speed, because it is proven, and there are so many examples that actually it's great for drivers as well as vulnerable road users. To say that, and I think Alderman Barakis had an article suggesting that 11 injuries weren't, there's only 11 injuries. 11 injuries, tell that to those people who are injured. We shouldn't be politicising this. This is an important step for our city, and I welcome the amendment.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on the amendment, I'll put that, because there is still a chance to say something on the motion as amended before we finally vote on that. So if anyone would like to vote against Alderman Thomas's amendment, please raise your hand now. Councillor Ewan wants to. So we might just quickly go around. Anyone against? Sorry, I'll just go around and see how you want to vote. If you would like to vote in favour or against Alderman Thomas's amendment. Deputy Lord Mayor.
For.
Alderman Zuko.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Barakis.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
Councillor Coates.
Against.
And I'll vote for.
So, Lord Mayor, it's carried 10 votes to 2.
Okay, so we now, if you'd like to speak for the motion as amended, and you would like to speak on that, please raise your hand. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I suppose there's been talks of, the politicising the debate, misleading comments and all this kind of stuff, and even the suggestion that people that have concerns about what's being proposed don't value safety. I think that's a bit. I think that's the ultimate politicisation of this issue. I think if there ever was any. But look, obviously safety is an important factor, and I think to suggest that anyone's not interested in that, I think is furphy. But if 40 kilometres an hour is safer than 50 kilometres an hour, and the argument's being put that 30 kilometres an hour is safer than 40, and to that I'm glad that the council has seen some reason and taken on the suggestions or the recommendations by the Transport Commissioner. But if 30 is safer than 40 and 40 is safer than 50 and vice versa, nobody so far in the public or tonight or in committee has given a justification on why this shouldn't just be taken to its logical conclusion. If the only factor that we're talking about is safety, we can guarantee the safety of pedestrians by turning the whole CBD into a 0 km/h zone. There'll be zero chance that there's any accidents. Obviously that's absurd, and I think most people would agree that's absurd, and I can actually see a few people laughing. But the whole notion that this is absurd, that's an absurd assertion, means that there are other factors that need to be taken into consideration. You know, the whole reason why we had this amendment was because the Transport Commissioner, or through the network operator, had said that they weren't comfortable with going with the 30 km/h speed limit reductions without getting some modelling done. Modelling that is already coming to the council, not modelling that we need to commission and spend money and waste time. Modelling that's already almost finished. You know, and the Transport Commissioner has said that they're uncomfortable doing this with the 30 km/h reductions, but I'd like to see it for that. So it does beg the question why we are choosing not to take into consideration this stuff. Councillor Harvey did list the organisations that have made contributions to this debate and support. He you know, and the plethora of information and research and statistical information supporting the benefits this will have to road safety, but there was no inclusion of the impacts this will have on traffic in Hobart. We've seen, you know, suggestions of the impact this has had in Melbourne, which has a vastly different public transport network than Hobart does, and a vastly different geography. We've seen no suggestion as to what the case is going to be for Hobart, considering that information is already on the way. We also didn't have any suggestion what the Department of State Growth thinks about this. We saw their comments in the media today. So look, these are, you know, to suggest that the only people that might have suggestions about the process that this is going down are being misleading or being emotive. I would wonder if they've got the same concerns about the comments that were given via the NOP about the Traffic Transport Commissioner. I think to suggest that this debate is being made purely on emotion and purely on some attempt to politicise and mislead the public, frankly, I think is offensive. I think there are some real considerations that the public wants to have ventilated. There's clearly been quite a lot of public concern and public interest in this debate, and no one has yet made the case as to why this can't wait 4 weeks. I think we are at this point to get a study on the impacts that this will have on the traffic network that we've already commissioned and we've already paid for. It seems a waste of money not to use it for that, not to use this information for its own purpose. You know, so look, I'm still not. I was happy to support the amendment because I think, you know, baby steps are working towards a somewhat better result than I think was originally put. But look, I'm not comfortable supporting this until we can see the data. We've got one side of the equation and not the other, and this is something that we're ultimately supposed to be doing in we've been talking about wanting to do in a collaborative our transport network. Sorry, that is
30 seconds, Alderman
Thank
Brackus.
you. To talk in a collaborative environment with the state government. There's been talks that this doesn't breach that, but I would challenge anyone to explain how us changing the speed limits won't affect traffic light coordination or won't affect other road infrastructure. This is something that's ultimately been done on an ad hoc basis. And look, I'm frankly not confident, not happy supporting this. So look, I'll be voting against this, and I'd be urging everyone to do the same so we can get to something that's a bit more of a coordinated approach, as we've agreed to do with the state government.
Councillor Ewan.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, I think the slippery slope argument is quite frankly ridiculous. Nobody's suggesting that we reduce the speed to the point of cars being kicked out of the city entirely. I voted against the amendment because 30 kilometres an hour is best practice, and our community deserves evidence-based best practice public policies. I'm sorry to the community that we can't progress this as quickly as they deserve, but I'm pleased that we'll be seeing at least some reduction in speed. I hope this gets up.
Okay, any further hands up on this? I think Councillor Harvey, you'll get to sum up. Any other discussion? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I just wanted to make, I guess, an observation or two. I view the blanket lowering, if you like, of speeds along main arterial roads as a bit of a sledgehammer approach where, you know, I think we have to applaud. I mean, the move of this motion listed all these organisations and great reasons why we should be doing what we can for road safety, to which I don't think anyone disagrees. But I mean, I did note that you know, it was mentioned that there's great value to businesses, the shopping strips are going to be better and whatever, but none of the people pushing this seem to be those organisations. So either they don't see the benefit of it, or they do see the benefit of it, but it's not of such benefit that they're so passionate about it changing. And look, my biggest fear is always that Hobart is a unique city with geography where, if you like, we act as both an inner CBD area, but also as a conduit. So people from down south wanting to get to the airport, to the hospital, to the whatever, have to come through the city. And look, quite frankly, when it's busy in the middle of the day, people struggle to get to these speeds anyway. So in one sense, it's a bit of a moot point there, but it does then create a lot of hassle and pain and slowness for people wanting to use it as a way of travelling through to get from point A to point B, but doesn't actually go through the city. So look, I think there are far better effective ways to increase road safety. We know that having more trees next to the roads, we know that having, you know, putting speed bumps in certain areas, we know that targeting, you know, intersections with different signage, whatever, can be very, very effective. And I just feel that this proposal is a little bit too broad, too sweeping, and a sledgehammer approach. So that was my reasons for opposing. That said, obviously I have received a lot of feedback from the community, but it definitely has not been one way. It's a lot of people passionately either for or against, but ultimately I think that they're running different arguments. The people arguing for it are all about road safety, which I applaud, but people against it are pointing out that there are severe disadvantages that will come of this, and I think we need to tread very, very warily. Thank you.
Thanks. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I've always been a person to believe that we all should show leadership. Considering there's always a lot of discussion in regards to cars on the road, and we all should walk and we all should ride bikes and do all those things. I assure you, Lord Mayor, that, you know, I don't think I'll be one person that's going to be riding a bike in the middle of winter and a rainy night, trying to take people out to dinner or whatever have you, or my friends. I think, you know, if we're going to really, as elected members of the City of Hobart, demonstrate leadership, and I think it's got to start from our elected members. And maybe it's time that each elected member who advocates that we've got to ride and walk and all that, sell their cars and don't have their cars, and also give away their private little car park at the council chambers. Like, I don't want to mention any names, but I was in the council today with a number of elected members' cars who continue to advocate that we should walk and ride bikes. Well, if that's the case, Lord Mayor, I urge each and every elected member who advocates that to the public and advocates it to me, that to show leadership and sell your car. I'm not, Lord Mayor, because I just bought a brand new car, so I intend to drive and I will abide by the speed limit. And I think, Lord Mayor, that the next time an elected member tries to say to me or to any person that we should do things, maybe the whole lot of us should, that want to advocate it, show the leadership, give up your car, walk to Town Hall and ride your bike to Town Hall, because that's the way you show leadership.
Okay, if you could just pop your hands down, Councillor Coates and Alderman Zuko. I've got Councillor Sherlock next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I won't take too much of your time and everybody else's time, but I did just want to say, just pick up on the point about why we can't just wait the 4 weeks for the additional information. And I think that has been pointed out probably in the reports and probably the history that exists over this particular issue, and just with regards to 40 to 50 years of best practice within this area. But specifically with regards to the 4 weeks comment, if we look at GAL's reports, if we look at the 2018 transport strategy, if we look at the inner city action plan, those various things actually pointed out that we should actually reduce speed limits in the CBD. And from an economics point of view, I think it should also be pointed out, I'm sure people also read the Hart Foundation Good for Business case studies, which focused on, nicer, safer, and also had the statistics about how it increases land value and also business vitality, because we do also look at footfall when we look at economics. And I think those 2 points are really important to understand. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Coates, you've still got your hand up. Is that a question or are you? Councillor Coates? Have you still got your hand up for a reason or? No. Okay, Councillor Shirk's got her hand down. Is there anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, no hands. Okay, before I ask Alderman Harvey to sum up, I might say a few comments. Look, I think I'm very supportive of this motion, and I'm glad to see that I think we're going to have a really strong majority in support, because we are elected into our roles as city managers, and one of our first priorities, I believe, is the safety of the city, and it really does need to be a top priority. It's not the only priority, but it is a very important priority. And the discussion I've heard from the public in the debate about this in the last week or so is that people do want us to put science and evidence and road safety at the heart of this decision and the heart of our thinking. And one of the reasons they're comfortable in asking us to do that is because they can see that we're one of the last capital cities in the country to move our CBD, which is highly pedestrian, going on, lots of cars coming and going in and out of parking spots. We're one of the last CBDs to actually shift down to 40. And so I think this step is really just catching up and ensuring that Hobart is staying in touch with modern urban city management practice. And as people have mentioned, there are many traffic engineers, road safety strategies at the state, local, and national level that recommend the shift to 40 or lower in high pedestrian areas where there's a lot of vulnerable road users. Look, I do think it is really important to honour and make policy change to reflect the fact that we have had death and serious injury in our city. I do take that really seriously. It worries me that we might have further serious injury and death, and if there's anything that we can do as decision makers to prevent further injury, serious injury and death, I want to take those steps, and I hope that we all do. When I did look at the pedestrian, as we know, pedestrians are particularly vulnerable because if there's a collision with a ton or two of metal, the pedestrian usually comes out worse. And when you look at the City of Hobart municipality figures, we actually have had 5 pedestrian deaths in our municipality just since July 2016. And that includes Campbell Street, someone in Newtown, Davey Street, Victoria Street and Collins Street. So if we go just outside this CBD area, and all of these accidents did occur with a vehicle. And if that vehicle was travelling just that little bit more slowly, they may have had time to respond and react to avoid the collision. Also the impact of that collision, the energy and force behind that collision would not have had potentially the same fatal impact with just a little bit of a lower speed limit. And I want to also acknowledge and pay respects to the drivers who are involved in those incidences, because although they may not have been injured or they didn't die, the impact on them and their lives would change their lives forever as well. So yeah, we can't stop all accidents in our city, but if public health and road safety experts are telling us that we can help to reduce accidents and reduce the trauma of road accidents, why wouldn't we take that advice. And a lower speed limit in the CBD, you know, we are running on creating a safe, people-friendly, vibrant experience for the millions of visitors that come to our CBD, and they want to explore on foot. And in our neighbourhood shopping streets, where this decision will also impact on our neighbourhood shopping streets, we want to create places where kids and senior citizens and outdoor diners and cyclists can all enjoy their neighbourhood street. And so, yes, our streets are for cars, but they are also for people. And I expect that many drivers, when we explain the facts to them, that a difference between 50 and 40 is probably over a kilometre is about 18 seconds difference. I bet that most Hobart drivers would be happy to give just a couple of extra seconds to their journey in order for us to have a safer city. So I recommend, I'm glad to support this, and I certainly look forward to having discussions with the Transport Commissioner and the Minister for Road Safety, because I'd really like their strong endorsement of this plan as well. Thank you. Alderman Harvey, did you want to say anything just to sum up?
Just a few brief words, Lord Mayor. Just a quote from the acting manager from the Network Operating Plan. They said the Transport Commissioner is likely to be amenable to a broad adoption of 40K, followed by refinement, including 30K zones after further investigating the Network Operating Plan have been completed. So the 30K is not off the table. It's just something that may occur later. The manager of the Network Operating Plan suggests that the Transport Minister will be interested in looking at that. I'd also like to say something about the number of crashes. That figure of 1,011 crashes that occurred in the city in the last few years is not just one person involved. There's not just one person involved in a crash. It often involves multiple people. So how many passengers are in the car? How many people in the family are affected by the crash? So there is the knock-on effect, as I think yourself mentioned, Lord Mayor. So a crash can affect many, many people. For example, the poor person that was knocked over recently in Hobart and is suffering a number of injuries, her whole family is affected by her injuries. It's not just her, it's the whole family. It's her work environment now that has changed. So every incident has a multiplier effect. Look, I'd also like to suggest that Alderman Zuko needs to be careful with his ad hominem approach to argument. So Linda's laughing at me there. But we need to focus on the safety of the people of Hobart and our visitors, and lowering speed limits is well understood to improve safety. And it's also well understood that it improves the amenity of the city, which makes it a more attractive place to visit. So any arguments that this is a bad idea are dispelled with evidence and data and world's best practice, which says that lowering speed limits are really important. It's not a sledgehammer approach, as suggested by Councillor Coates. This is a sensible approach. It's not taking things too far too soon. It's not aiming to get all cars out of the city. It's not aiming to reduce speed limits to zero, as has been implied. It's about facilitating a better
30 seconds, Councillor Harvey.
Experience in the city for everyone, and to move traffic through the city at a safe pace. It doesn't affect the arterial roads. It doesn't affect Macquarie and Davey. It's for a few roads within the city that will be much safer roads for everybody.
Okay, so I'll just go around and ask how you'd like to vote on this motion. Deputy Lord Mayor?
In favour.
Alderman Zuko?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe?
In favour, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Barakis?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Ewan?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For.
Councillor Coates.
Against.
And I will vote for.
So, Lord Mayor, it's carried 9 votes to 3.
Okay, we'll move on now to item 11, which is the solar panels notice of motion, and invite Councillor Harvey to introduce this motion.
I'll move the item, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Yes, Lord Mayor. This came about as a result of a previous notice of motion to look at our solar panel arrangements and the benefits that they give to the council. So I think it was quite clear that there is a benefit from having solar panels, but also we could have an even more improved benefit by continuing to look at other other technologies such as smart grids, peer-to-peer trading, solar and battery microgrids, etc., etc. So there's a lot of technologies that councils across the country are investigating, and we're always looking at best practice and what's next, what's the next generation of technology. It's just a normal process. So the recommendation supports that we continue to look at these things. So I'll just read through the first bit. As a larger energy user, council continue to create energy cost and greenhouse gas reductions by pursuing new technologies and opportunities, including that range of options, and also that acknowledges that solar panels do play an important role in the way we produce energy and use energy, and that by connecting them with other forms of technology down the track or in the future, that we can get some major benefits for the city of Hobart.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to this item? I can't see any hands, so I'm going to put that. Would anyone like to vote against this motion? Just put your hands up. Okay, I've got one hand. If anyone else would like to vote against this. I might call them out because I'm just not sure whether that hand's still up. So, Deputy Lord Mayor.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Baracus.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
And Councillor Coates.
For.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, how do you vote?
Oh, I'll vote for.
So it's carried, Lord Mayor, 11 votes to 1.
Okay, moving on to item 12, council delegations. Councillor Harvey, would you like to move this?
Yeah, I'll move the item. Call for a seconder.
Seconded by, need a hand up, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor Harvey?
No, I think this is fairly straightforward. It's just an additional delegation for one of the officers to take on a particular role. So if there's any questions, I'll direct them towards the director, but I think it's straightforward.
Okay, I'll just call out again if you're in favour or against. Deputy Lord Mayor?
For.
Alderman Zuko?
For.
Alderman Briscoe?
For.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Baracus?
For.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Ewan?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For.
Councillor Coates? And I'm for too.
So it's unanimous, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So item 13 is a special report from the General Manager. General Manager, would you like to say anything about this?
No, Lord Mayor, I don't think so. Like, it's fairly self-explanatory. All we're seeking tonight is some direction from the council that we put out the consultants' reports for public consultation for a 1-month period. And Lord Mayor, that we are suggesting that following that public consultation period, we report back to council in September with the results of that survey or that consultation.
Okay, so I need a mover for that. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Dutta. Is there any discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Yes, is that, who was that?
Sexton.
Oh, Alderman Sexton, yes.
Lord Mayor, as I discussed with you the other day when we had our conversation, I'm very supportive of the reports going out for...
Sorry, Alderman Sexton, if you would just be careful with your microphone, you're coming in and out of, we can't sort of hear you consistently.
No, and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. The microphone's wherever it is.
That's good now, whatever you're doing now.
Okay, I'm just keeping my head still. Whilst I'm very supportive of making the reports available for members of the public to view and read, having listened to the consultant's presentation, I found it an enormous amount of information, some 260 odd pages worth of information, as I understand it, over 70 recommendations. And just to put it out there and ask the public to comment on it, for me, I think may produce a result which is not helpful. So what I think that we should do, and I have prepared an alternative motion or an amendment, that we receive and note the consultant's report, that it be publicly released online for public information, but that council officers prepare a further report which includes a number of questions, perhaps 10 or more, to be asked in the subsequent public consultation process. If those questions be considered and approved by council at a subsequent meeting, that would be a meeting prior to putting it out for formal public consultation. And that way we can determine exactly what it is we want to know from the members of the public about whichever of the most important or most doable of the recommendations that we've received. What I would hate to do is to put out 76 recommendations and find later on from our officers that half of them aren't feasible, or we'd never be able to afford them, or they're 50 years down the track. What I need to understand is exactly what is doable, what's feasible, what is the priority in the minds of the council officers, that is, qualified advice from council officers, on what are the most important things that we need to do, and what the timeline would be, and then frame the questions for the public consultation process to allow us to determine exactly what the public thinks about those most important things. And also, of course, we need to understand who these people are who are responding. So what do the North Hobart residents think? What do the North Hobart traders think? What do the customers or visitors to the North Hobart think? Whether there are differences, and if so, how we can reconcile them.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I honestly cannot.
Sorry, Alderman Sexton. Yeah, you're coming a little bit in and out, but
okay. Well, I can't help that. I don't know.
You're very clear now. So I think, but I think we've got your amendment up here. I'm just wondering, given the recommendation actually lists all the reports and does provide a couple of dates, something commencing on the 20th of July and a further council report in September. I'm just wondering whether you'd like to add your items as an amendment to the existing recommendation.
Well, what I'm trying to say, Lord Mayor, is that what I would like is a council officer's report with questions to go out for public consultation prior to the formal public consultation process occurring. So I don't want the month or so that we allow the public to read these documents to be deemed to be the formal public consultation period.
Okay.
So I'm happy to do it as an amendment. If that's not going to be contrary to the substantive motion or to the proposed motion.
I might just see if there's a seconder first. Alderman Sexton, seconder for Alderman Sexton's amendment. Is that Alderman Thomas? I can't see. Actually, unfortunately, can't see everyone's hands.
Can I just clarify?
Yeah, Alderman Thomas has got his hand up. Yes, General Manager.
It's not an amendment because it's Alderman Sexton has moved the motion in substitution of the recommendation put forward by the General Manager. So it hasn't come from a committee. It's a report directly from me onto the council agenda, Lord Mayor. So Alderman Sexton's motion, if it's seconded, is the motion before you, not an amendment.
Okay.
Question, Lord Mayor. Question, Lord Mayor. Does that mean
yes.
that the officer's recommendation has been moved by, I think it was the deputy? We would have to vote that one down before we could consider Alderman Sexton's motion.
I don't think we've actually. Oh, did we move it?
Yes, I moved it.
Oh, we did move it. Okay.
My apologies, Lord Mayor. If it has been moved and seconded, then that has to be disclosed of. So it is an amendment.
Okay. So I guess the question is to the mover and the seconder of the amendment, or this might be a foreshadowed motion. So Alderman Sexton, do you want this put as a separate motion?
Lord Mayor, according to what the General Manager has indicated, it is an alternative motion. So
okay.
Yes, it would be a
all right.
foreshadowed motion.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to just, now we've got that, I'll just note that that's there, and I'm sure other elected members will note it's there as well. And we'll go back to the other recommendation and need to deal with that one first. So that is moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Dutta. If we could just pop that other one down at the moment. And would anyone like to speak on the recommendation before us? Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, I'm in favour of the original motion and I'll be voting for it. I think that there's a transparency issue here. We need to get this information out as soon as possible so that the stakeholders can see what is in the reports that have been prepared for the council. So I'll be going with the original motion. Yeah, I'm not speaking to the other motions. If this one fails, then we'll speak to the other motions. So I'll be supporting the original motion, this motion before us now.
Okay, any further discussion on this, Councillor Dutta?
Lord Mayor, I am of the view that the council staff have looked at it quite clearly, and they have gone through it with some understanding, considering the fact that the amount of consultation that was done with the community and how this whole project and the documentation has come about. So because of that, I think it is important for us to give it to the community. It's very important that we keep them engaged. If we don't do that, then I think the community expectation is very important for us, that we share this with them and together work together this issue. Thank you.
Point of clarification, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Sexton.
As I said right at the beginning, and maybe you didn't hear me because my voice was going in and out, part 2 of the alternative motion says that the report be publicly released online for public information. So everybody who's interested in reading it can do so immediately. I'm not suggesting that it be withheld for any period of time to go out tomorrow, but that the formal period of public consultation does not begin until the council officers have been able to report back to us and include a number of questions which elected members agree should be asked, so that we've got answers that we need, the questions that we need answered.
Okay. So that was a point of clarification from Alderman Sexton about his about the alternative motion. Are there any further comments on the alternative the current recommendation in front of us? Alderman Burnett, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I just, I suppose I go to the heart of this process here. This is the first time that I have seen this significant amendment to the motion before us, or further proposal. it would be incumbent on the mover of such a significant change to the motion to actually perhaps spread that between colleagues so that we could actually discuss it in the future.
Yep. Okay. All right. So if there's no further discussion on the recommendation from the General Manager's report, I'll put that before we go to other motions. So is I'll go around and ask.
So just to clarify, are we voting for the original motion, not Alderman
just the original motion? Yes. Okay. So Deputy Lord Mayor.
For.
Alderman Zuko.
Against.
Alderman Briscoe.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Barakis.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Ewan.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
Councillor Coates.
Against, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for it.
So, Lord Mayor, that's a 6-6 vote. So the motion is lost.
Okay, so we will now move to the motion that's been put by Alderman Sexton and seconded by Alderman Thomas. Now, I would just like to just talk on a process point very briefly that that this amendment has only just been circulated. So, Alderman Sexton, if you could perhaps just try and explain again for everyone what your rationale was in the difference between this, and I know the sound isn't so good, but if you or Alderman Thomas wouldn't mind doing that, just to reopen this again.
Okay, I'm leaning forward. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, so
Alderman Sexton starts. Can we just have the motion that we're looking at now up on the screen? Thank you.
Okay, so because of the fact that we had a presentation from consultants and it didn't go to a committee, there was a limited opportunity to, certainly from my perspective, to get a clear understanding of exactly what the council officers thought about the actual reports themselves. And also there was a lack of opportunity for the elected members to determine which of the 70 plus recommendations were the most important, what exactly we needed to find out from the public in terms of the public consultation, and where that would ultimately lead to. So, as I said right at the beginning, I'm not intending at all to prevent the public from having access to these reports. On the contrary, they will have access to the reports immediately, and then they will have a further opportunity to go back to those reports once the formal consultation occurs, which I hope will be prefaced by some comments by our council officers indicating their opinion on some of the recommendations, and of course collecting information from the public through questions which will identify priorities and also identify the demographic that's actually responding to those priorities. So that's it in a nutshell. I apologise for not circulating it earlier, but as I said, normally this would have gone to a committee and there would have been an opportunity for discussion at committee. I tried to get this together in my own mind as soon as I could, and I spoke to various people, but it wasn't until today that I was really able to do that, and including the Deputy General Manager. So I apologise for springing this on you, but as I said, it's not intended and was never intended to obstruct access by the public to these reports. It was simply to try and formalise the process that we're going to use for public consultation, and also to improve the understanding not only of the elected members about exactly what's being proposed, but also ultimately the public who we are asking to comment on it. So that's probably all I can.
Thanks, Alderman Sexton. That's a lot clearer. Okay, discussions on the motion before us. I just need to see, actually I can't see who's got their hand up. I can see Alderman Briscoe. Yeah, your hand's up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So just as a clarification from Alderman Sexton through you, Lord Mayor, so the report would come back to a committee, presumably the Finance Committee, and then come to Council, give us plenty of opportunity to talk about possible 10 questions. And also, as you said, Alderman Sexton, that would have a better understanding of the priorities. Is that correct? So you
absolutely, that is correct, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alderman Sexton. Look, I support the process that goes to committee eventually. The idea of going straight to Council without an opportunity to thrash out these issues in a committee, in my view, is lessening the standards that normally we do have at the Hobart City Council. Looking at Alderman Sexton's amendment motion there, I can see all the aspects covered off. If the report is public release, I believe it is online anyway now, and the council officers form an opinion about it, and then we do the public consultation. It happens, and in those 4 different domains. So look, I can't see any great controversy about this. Everyone gets a chance to have a say. We get a chance to look at the officer's report and also debate it in committee, and then it comes to council, which presumably could be a few council meetings away, but it still it progresses this very important report for North Hobart.
Councillor Harvey? You just need to unmute yourself, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I think we're in a position where we'll probably have to support this now. It's very poor process, though, to just drop motions on us which have such significant bearing on the outcomes of these discussions. So I would have liked this to have been circulated a bit earlier. I'm not sure who might have received it, but we should all receive it at the same time if there's going to be alternative motions like this. I think that, as Alderman Briscoe said, the reports are already on the council agenda, so they've all been put out publicly. Can I just clarify that with the General Manager?
That is correct, Lord Mayor. They have been published on the open council agenda.
Okay. So I guess that now the reports will put up in a different format outside of the agenda, so all the other stuff's not included. So it is a separate report. So will these reports be broken down separately so they're easy to download and to read rather than in one consolidated report?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Following tonight's council meeting, it is our intention to make those reports more user-friendly. They'll just reproduce tonight for the purposes of the agenda.
Okay, so they will be available immediately anyway for people to be able to start thinking about their feedback. So I'm fine with that. So there's our transparency. We've already put them up and they will be in a readable format tomorrow, hopefully. With regard to producing 10 questions, if we're going to go through a consultation process normally, or an engagement process, normally we have, a detailed engagement process. But have we done that? And are we looking for another engagement process that's incredibly detailed to come up with a vision for the site? Or we got a vision and we're just waiting for comments on it? Are we looking for another vision on top of this vision? So through you, Lord Mayor, to the General Manager, what are we looking for with an engagement process now? And especially having 10 questions, is that a proper engagement process, or should we leave this with our officers that are experienced with engagement processes to come up with a formula?
The intent, Lord Mayor, was that we would simply socialise these reports into the community. there is a lot of expectation in the community now that these reports will be made publicly available, and the opportunity for the community to have conversations with the consultants and the council officers. So that was the intent and the reason why we put it straight onto the council agenda. We wanted the process to be organic and put the reports out there as they are for the community and the traders and other stakeholders to have a say. So that was the intent, and I don't apologise for putting it straight onto the council agenda, because that was the intent behind it.
So that means we will have a process, a council process for community engagement. Would that include 10 questions? I'm not sure the relevance of 10 questions, and I'm not sure of the relevance of the elected representatives trying to come up with 10 questions that they're happy with, rather than just let the engagement process develop with the council officers. So is that, what do you think? Is it 10 questions, is this changing the whole way we engage, or should we just let the process as we usually do run, rather than try and direct it with 10 questions? GM.
I wonder whether that's a question more for whether it's for the mover or General Manager. Did you want to respond to that? It's more the mover of the motion.
Well, perhaps it is a matter for Alderman Sexton to answer, Lord Mayor, but clearly the intent of the officers in writing this report and putting these this recommendation to you tonight was that it just goes out the way it is, and we have a conversation with all key stakeholders and bring that back to the council. But at the end of the day, I think it's a question for Alderman Sexton rather than me.
All right, well, I'll direct it to Alderman Sexton. What's the purpose of 10 questions rather than just let the officers go through the usual engagement process?
So it doesn't actually, I mean, I've said 10 questions there, but obviously the council officers may come back with a report and say, well, actually we need more than 10 questions. The idea is that we identify those issues that we specifically want the engagement to address. So if you've got 76 recommendations, people will focus on certain things, or they may just be overwhelmed by the fact that there's so many things to comment on, and we may just get a mishmash of stuff back. And whilst that might be organic, it may not actually be very informative. It may not help us to make the decisions or to understand exactly what it is that the public want us to do. So the aim there was really just to draw attention to the fact that it would be handy for certainly for me anyway, to understand what the council officers thought were the priorities, what the council officers thought were those things which we really must get some sort of definitive response from the community about. And whether it's 10 or 12 or 5 or 15, doesn't really matter. But that was the intention. And this was based on something that I saw that was very good. It actually came from a law society, believe it or not, when they were looking for comments, responses from their members about particular things. They sent out a report, the whole report for people to read, but then they did exactly this. They drafted a number of questions which they specifically want answered. And that helped enormously for them to determine those issues which they believed needed determining. So that's the idea, to formalise it slightly more, so that if we as elected members have issues that we want answered, we make sure they're answered and we understand who's answering them and what they're saying about it.
Well,
sorry,
I haven't commented yet. There's been questions. Well, look, I'll comment now. I think I'm going to have to support this, but I would like the 10 questions to be removed, because I'm quite happy that we have a very experienced team of officers that do the community engagements now. The Newtown precinct or the Newtown Main Road plan was an incredible engagement process. It's been presented at forums and things. So we have a very experienced team doing a very thorough job when it comes to community engagement. And I don't think that the elected representatives have that same knowledge. And I think that we should leave it to the community engagement people who are experienced with this to run the process. I don't have any questions for the community, because I'd rather hear what they've got to say than try and direct it towards particular answers or whatever we're searching for with 10 particular questions that we think is important. It's not about what we think is important. It's about what the community think is important. So I'd much rather it be their engagement process than our engagement process. So if you'd be happy to just change part 3 to say that the council report on the community engagement process that is proposed, I'd be very supportive.
So I won't be doing. So I won't be doing that, Lord Mayor, because I'd specifically want the opportunity to. It won't be limiting the public's ability to comment on everything. It will just simply be saying that there are 10 things that, or 12 things or 5 things that we particularly would like your opinion on. You can comment on anything you like, but we specifically want you to comment on these if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
And that's a commonly dealt with process.
Yeah.
I'm just reading something from the.
I think that's clear, Alderman Sexton.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, look, I just wanted to speak quickly in support of this motion by Alderman Sexton. I guess harking back to my days as a data analyst. You know, it is a data. I spent the best part of a day really reading through all this, and there is a lot of information there, and a lot of it's very good. And if members haven't had a chance to read it all, I would encourage them to look at attachment E, which I think is the being a numbers guy, I think that's the most fascinating one of them. But anyhow, look, yeah, look, I tend to agree with Alderman Sexton. You do often get much better responses, if you like, when you can find some commonalities and ask, look, you know, we know that issue X is going to be contentious. You know, what's your thing? I mean, it's a bit like a job interview in a way. You get 100 resumes, and you have to make sure you ask the same questions to get the responses back on everyone. I mean, everyone will read this report and come away with their own view. And you know, I think the more analysis in a way, the better. I mean, you know, if things change, it'll have an impact for decades and decades potentially. And I mean, even reading through this, there's some very fascinating information in there, which was news to me. You know, coming out of this report. So. Look, I would urge you all to support this motion Alderman Sexton's put up, and I think he's doing it for the right reasons. Thank you.
Okay, so I have no further hands up, so I'm going to put the Alderman Zuko's got his hand up.
Look, I just want to make one point. I did notify the General Manager and the Director that this should have gone to committee, would have been the best place, but it can't do much about it now. This, to my point of view, makes a point that from now on, when we got the reports such as this, they should go to committee first. That's my point.
Councillor Dutta, you actually do have your hand up by the looks.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. You know, again, I'm just simply questioning the rationale of 10. I don't know what the rationale is. I think the other point for me to note is that I find and consider the officers quite capable in this area, and therefore I was supporting their recommendation. This way, it appears to me, unless I'm interpreting it wrongly, that we are going to be controlling the agenda. And it's not for us to control the agenda. It is for the community to tell us. And for me, that is more important. And hence, I will have difficulty supporting this.
Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I suppose I'll start by making the point. I think it's given that this seems to be part of one of the contentious parts of this motion, that I don't think that there's anything inappropriate of the council having input in what the terms of reference of the consultation process is. I think that's absolutely appropriate, and I think to suggest that that is appropriate, I don't think says anything about what the council views or the council's faith in the officers. I think those two things are entirely independent. I think, you know, we do have faith in our council's ability to do this work, but at the same time, we ultimately are elected representatives of the city, so we are right to want to have some clarification and some knowledge and some input on what the actual terms of reference for this is. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and I imagine, without wanting to speak for Alderman Sexton, I imagine that's what the intent of the part 3 of this motion is to just ensure that the council has some input on what the terms of reference for this is. I will speak to, I think, most of the council, I believe, was present at the briefing for this, and I also would have liked this to go to committee. I think this is a issue that it's an important issue for the city. I think it's a crucial part of our city is the North Hobart precinct, and this, I think, is something that warrants a proper long-form debate. I don't think we can really properly ventilate all of this in the form of 5-minute speeches. But I do have some concerns about the report that was provided. I know there is a lot of talk about, we've got the facts and the facts are undisputable and we should be, just falling back onto what the advice is. Coming from my academic background was quite heavily into statistics. I just did notice some things with the information that was provided to us. They did have the time series graph of parking demand over the course of a day that was averaged out over a year, or calendar year, sorry. And it does suggest that at no point over the course of the day, over the year, does parking demand go past 85%. The issue with that is given that it's an average statistic, that implies that in the busier time of years there's very much a likelihood that there's a situation where parking can either reach or exceed 100% demand, which is something that definitely meets people's anecdotal experience. And then in the quieter time of the year, most likely the winter, you might have a situation where things are barely approaching 60% demand. And obviously, if you average those two out, you get 85%. I think we do need to get further, not just further consultation, but we do need to have a bit more clarification on what the actual statistics mean, because that statistic could say that there was 1 or 2 days with huge outliers that bumped it up to 85% and screwed with the average. It could mean that there's half of the year where it's above 85% and half of the year where it's well below. And I think, we can't make a policy decision without knowing whether or not we're talking about 1 or 2 outlier days where it's extremely busy, or if we're talking about 3 months or more where it's extremely busy. I think I know what the anecdotal experience suggests, but we can't make decisions purely on anecdotal evidence. I think that what's being proposed by Alderman Sexton is a good way forward. I think it gives us time to properly ventilate all of the concerns. I think we have multiple parties that are interested, not just we've got the traders, we've got the community associations, we've got the broader public. I think we need to make sure that we know who this consultation is going out to. And we need to, I think, have an understanding that the right questions are being asked, and we need to be comfortable that this is all going in the right direction. As far as obfuscation, I don't think that there's any risk of that happening, because, as has been said, the report and the consultation report is all going to be publicly published, so that any member of the public can read it at their heart's content and can, if they have concerns about it or have feedback they want to give to it, there'll be a process for them to do that. So, look, I think it's the right way forward. And I think it's just important that we sort of be mindful of what the statistics actually mean, because there's a few saying about statistics, and I won't say them out loud at the risk of prejudicing any of the members of the consulting firm. But the statistics really do need to be looked at in the right context. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying they do need some extra context. So, look, I'll commend the motion put by Alderman Sexton.
Okay, any further discussion? There's no other hands up, I don't think, that haven't spoken already. Yeah, I'm happy to support this motion because I think it's not too dissimilar to the spirit of the General Manager's recommendation, which was that these very detailed pieces of work that a lot of people have put a lot of time and energy into put out into the public. They will be out there. People will look at them, and I'm sure be in touch with all of us about their views about different elements of the reports and some of the ideas. I think the intention of the original motion was for a further officer report to come back to us in September. This one also talks about a further officer report. It doesn't have a date, but no doubt it will come back, and then there'll be some officer recommendations before we go further. So I don't think there's a really major difference between the recommendations, which is why I'm happy to support it, because the main thing I think is that, yeah, 700 plus people had their say. Some people gave quite a lot of time in the workshops. It is a really timely piece of work because North Hobart was one of the council's first street upgrades, and the placemaking elements of that street upgrade led to the success that North Hobart has been in the last few decades. But it is time to have a fresh look and to really engage very broadly with customers and residents as well as traders about the future vision for this part of Hobart. And so I think it's been a really positive process so far, and I think the amendment certainly has all the key principles that it's obviously out for consultation. There's time to discuss and have a conversation about all of the various findings, of which, yes, there are quite a lot. And council will have obviously a role in that process along the journey as well. So if there's no further discussion, I will put that and go around and ask if you vote for or against. Deputy Lord Mayor?
For.
Alderman Zuko?
For.
Alderman Briscoe?
For.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Barakis?
For.
Councillor Dutta?
Against.
Councillor Ewan?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For.
Councillor Coates?
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for.
So, Lord Mayor, it's carried 11 votes to 1.
Okay, so we're moving on now to item number 14. There's another report from the a memo from the General Manager. Would you like to speak to this, General Manager?
Well, Lord Mayor, I hope it's relatively self-explanatory, but I'll just say that what this memo is saying is effectively we can continue to meet online through Zoom like we've been doing for the last 3 months. And in fact, we can continue to meet online for some period of time. The Minister, in fact, what the memo is saying is we could meet for 60 days after the cessation of the pandemic. And the Minister has another 90 days after that before the order is actually revoked. So theoretically, at least, Lord Mayor, we could keep meeting this way for some period of time. What we have said in the report, though, Lord Mayor, as well, is that we have prepared a COVID safe plan for returning to face-to-face meetings. And what that plan is saying, given the 2 square metre rule and the 1.5 metre social distancing rules, we wouldn't be able to return to a meeting in the council chamber. You may recall we had a meeting, I think it was back in March, Lord Mayor, the last face-to-face meeting we had in the chamber. And that was only possible because Councillor Dutta at that particular time, Lord Mayor, was self-isolating. We wouldn't be able to get the number around the horseshoe, so to speak, if Councillor Dutta had attended. So it's simply, I don't think, possible within the confines of our COVID safe plan to return to meetings in the chamber. If the council were inclined, Lord Mayor, to move back to in-person meetings and move away from Zoom, we could conduct committees, we think, safely in the courtroom. And council meetings themselves, Lord Mayor, the only venue that's suitable would be the town hall itself. That's the only venue where we could get the social distancing and satisfy the public health guidelines. But Lord Mayor, we've made a recommendation. That's my recommendation to the council, but I'm really in the hands of the council now as to how they want to proceed going forward, given what I've just said.
I think I've got a mover of the General Manager's motion in Deputy Lord Mayor. Is that why you've got your hand up? Yeah. And is it seconded by Councillor Ewan?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So that's a mover and a seconder. Would anyone like to speak to this?
Yeah, just a question, if I may, after moving it, Lord Mayor. Just through you to the General Manager. General Manager, when we do go back to the council chambers, hopefully we'll go back at some stage. Is there a likelihood that we will have the capacity to have like a hybrid or a filmed meeting?
General Manager?
A hybrid meeting. I'm not quite sure. Like at the end of the day, I suppose what I'm saying, Lord Mayor, at the moment, with the current social distancing guidelines, we can't go back to the chamber. But if the question is, can we go back to the chamber and stream the meetings, then the short answer to that question is yes. But at the moment, we're not saying the chamber is a safe environment to conduct meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, hand up. Councillor Ewan, is your hand up to speak or just to second the motion?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to quickly say, like, I'm really enjoying the meetings being on Zoom, and I'm sure a lot of other people here are as well. And just in terms of increasing accessibility for the community, I think it's been fantastic. And I've really enjoyed being able to go into committee meetings that I'm not actually on the committee for because I can't be there physically, even if I wanted to, if they were in person, because I have other commitments. But just to be able to listen in is really valuable. So I really hope that in future we can have some kind of a hybrid model where, you know, people can dial in if they're not able to be physically present, because it's just so much better.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I see the advantage of Zoom for committee meetings, and interestingly enough, I sort of agree with Councillor Ewan there that you can, it's very rare, you do get a little bit more involvement. You don't physically have to be to get what's happening at a committee. My feeling, though, is that we are losing something in the full count, not having full council meetings. So I'd be supportive as soon as possible to go back to physical full council meetings and leave the committees as they are, going back for Zoom now. 3 months' time seems an extraordinary time to review it, because that would take us up to September, October, maybe November. So I wonder if that I could move an amendment, rather than be reviewed in 3 months' time, reviewed in 2 months' time. It's sort of like a compromise. So if I move that as an amendment. Lord,
I need a seconder for Alderman Briscoe's amendment. Alderman Baracus.
Thank you.
Oh, no, Alderman Baracus is gone.
I don't know. I thought it was. I'll put it down as soon as it was acknowledged.
Oh, thank you, Alderman Baracus. Thank you. Okay. So, would anyone like to speak to Alderman Briscoe's amendment for 2 months? Otherwise, we'll put that before. Alderman.
I've got my hand up.
Luca. Yep.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I'm not necessarily totally against Alderman Briscoe's motion for 2 months, but because this is a changing environment, like we don't know what the government may or may not change with social distancing and or the amount of area per square metre, which may change. Because it's a never changing situation. I agree that we shouldn't be going in the track and saying, well, let's just do it for 3 months or 2 months. I believe we should be reviewing it as the government reviews things. Now it could be that we review it every month. But at the next month we look at the situation. If the government has changed the position, then we change accordingly. I have no issue with having some hybrid system, and I have no issue with having our meetings sent out via some format, like we do the recordings at the moment that's sent out. I've got no issue with that. All those things, I think, have been discussed over the years, but we have never really pursued it. So, if I may ask both the mover and the seconder, that it gets reviewed monthly on the basis of what happens with the state government policy on the COVID-19 situation.
Look, I think that's a sensible suggestion. I'm happy to move it to each monthly meeting we consider it again. Yep.
Is the seconder happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to support that, Lord Mayor.
Okay. All right. So we've got the amendment now, which is to change the recommendation. So rather than it saying 3 months' time, be reviewed monthly. So I'm going to put that now and see if I'll go around and see if there's support. Deputy Lord Mayor? What was that, sorry?
No.
No. Sorry. Alderman Zuko?
For.
Alderman Briscoe?
For.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
No.
Councillor Harvey?
No.
Alderman Barakis?
For.
Councillor Dutta?
No.
Councillor Ewan?
Against.
Councillor Sherlock?
Against.
Councillor Coates?
Against.
And myself, I'll vote against.
So, Lord Mayor, that amendment's lost 4 votes to 8.
Okay, so we go back to the substantive recommendation from the General Manager. Would anyone else like to speak to that? Is that your hand up, Alderman Zuko?
Lord Mayor.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we've got the recommendation from the General Manager, which I think was pretty clear in terms of some of their concerns with going back to the chamber. So I'll put that and I'll go around and see if you're for or against. Deputy Lord Mayor?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Barakis?
For.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Ewan?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For.
Councillor Coates?
For.
And I'm for as well.
So, Lord Mayor, that's carried 10 votes to 2.
Okie doke. So moving on now to item 15, which is a couple of bodies. Internal, external bodies that we've got vacancies for. I'm not sure whether any of these committees are actually meeting, but anyway, we've got this work to do. So we've got a couple of nominations to seek nominations for. So I'm just going to go through each of them and see if there's any nominations. So, do I need to move the recommendation to seek nominations or just start the process?
Well, look, I'm happy to start the process, Lord Mayor.
Okay.
Because I don't think move anything from the chair. So to start the process, I move the recommendations and nominations be taken as required and vote as required. I don't know how we're going to vote secretly, but still.
Okay. All right. So we've got a nomination for the chairperson of the Hobart Active Travel Committee. Would anyone like to nominate? Could everyone just pop their hands? Oh, pop your hands down if you wouldn't mind, just to start, because I'm just going to seek. Okay. So who would like to nominate someone?
I'm happy to nominate the Deputy Lord Mayor for that position.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Ewan. Okay, is there any other nominations? Anyone else want to nominate for that committee? No? Okay, so that one, there's no other nomination, so I'll declare that filled. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, nominations for the Superannuation Policy Group. Would someone like to nominate Alderman Briscoe?
Could I nominate Councillor Coates if he's interested in, barring Councillor Coates, Councillor Dutta?
Okay, so I'll go with Councillor Coates. Was there a seconder for Councillor Coates? I need some hands down, please.
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Alderman Suko. Okay, are there any other nominations?
Lord Mayor, I'd be interested in being on the superannuation board as well. Is this a one-person position or a two-person position?
There's, Lord Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. There is one vacancy on the superannuation policy group as we sit here at the moment.
So does that mean it's an open meeting to any councillor who'd like to attend?
Oh, well, look, Lord Mayor, it's like anything. It's like the risk and audit panel. If it's closed to the public, but obviously if an elected member has an interest, they can participate or watch as an observer, but not a decision maker.
Okay, so we've got one nomination then.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll let Councillor Coates have it, and I'll go as an observer. I think if I could get the agenda sent to me too. Thank you.
I just need to get clarity. Councillor Coates, you're happy with that nomination?
Yes, and for the benefit of members as well, I'm actually a trained financial planner, and I also worked for a while at Tasmanian Petrol Trustees, so I have some experience across trustee sort of superannuation stuff. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure I'll have to get my head around all the workings of the superannuation policy group, but I do have some experience in that area. So thank you.
Lord Mayor, could I just clarify that? Look,
yes.
It meets irregularly. I think we've met last year once. I'm a member. I'm an elected member there as well as two elected members. So it basically only meets when we have to consider topping up the super fund or otherwise. It's not a huge commitment for anyone.
Okay, thank you. So we've only received one nomination for that position, so I'll declare Councillor Coates the successful applicant for that position. So moving on now to item 3, which is the vacancy as the deputy member to Alderman Thomas. So this is deputy member of the Wellington Park Management Trust to Alderman Thomas. So this is only when Alderman Thomas isn't able to attend. Alderman Thomas, you've got your hand up. Did you want to nominate somebody? Sorry, we just can't hear. Just start again, please.
Sorry. Yeah, look, I'd like to nominate Alderman Coates. The reason being the Wellington Park Trust meets for something like 3-4 times a year. He would easily be able to manage that as well as the superannuation matter, and I think he'd bring a great deal of knowledge to that role.
Okay, just to clarify though, Alderman Thomas, this is your this is in case you can't go. Is that you're happy with that?
Yes, I understand that. Yes,
okay.
I understand.
Good. So that's been seconded by Alderman Briscoe by the looks. Is that right?
Yes, and some clarification, because there is a small sitting fee, will Alderman Coates now have to declare an interest? Perhaps the question is to the General Manager.
General Manager?
Declare an interest, Lord Mayor.
I'm not quite... It is a paid position. It is a paid position.
Well, only if he participates as Alderman Thomas's deputy. I'm not quite clear on the question.
Can I just clarify that, Lord Mayor?
Please.
Yep. I'm pretty sure when we originally got the nomination for Alderman Thomas and myself, the most recent member from the Hobart City Council, I had to leave the room because it is a paid, as I said, a small sitting fee that will go to Alderman Coates if he's the deputy when Alderman Thomas is not available. So, look, if the General Manager thinks it's okay for Alderman Coates to be here for the vote, that's fine. I'm just asking the question.
Oh, I understand the question.
I'm happy to recuse myself if that.
Yeah, I think in the benefits of probity, that probably isn't a bad. So, Craig, could you please put Alderman Coates into the waiting room just while we take this vote? Thank you, Gordon Briscoe.
Okay, so we've only got one nomination. So I guess I'm just going to declare that carried, or declare that filled. Good. Oh, we've got to deal with it all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we've got nomination to fill one vacant position as a member of the City Infrastructure Committee. We've got any nominations?
Lord Mayor?
Yes.
Look, I had a look at the positions on committees today, and I noticed that Alderman Barakis only has one committee. Some of us have 3, some of us have 4. So I'd like to nominate Alderman Barakis to help him fill his obligations as a elected representative on committees.
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to do that. I was actually hoping that somebody would nominate, but look, I'm more than happy to. Upon reflection, I think it's important to have a variety of voices on that committee, so I'm more than happy to accept that.
Welcome aboard.
Okay. So I need a seconder for Alderman Barakis's nomination. Councillor Sherlock, I think. Okay, and are there any other nominations for that committee? There's no other nominations, so I declare that position has been filled. Congratulations. And
so, Lord Mayor,
yes,
we go back and deal with the substantive item, and we'll put Councillor Coates back in the waiting room because it's relevant to his appointment to the Wellington Park.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So, if someone would like to move that we adopt the all of those nominees, Councillor Dutta, seconded by Councillor Ewan, or is anyone not in favour of that motion? Okay, I see no raised hands, so I'm going to declare that that one's been carried unanimously. And that brings to an end the open portion of our meeting. We'll now move to our closed portion. So thanks everyone who's watching. Oh, and would someone like to move that we move into the closed?
I'm happy to move that, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Barakis, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. All those in favour? Or is anyone against that moving into the closed? I see no hands up, so that's been carried unanimously. Thanks everyone for attending the meeting, and we'll now move into the